Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast.
So do we get to have the whole conversation again?
Oh no, that's
It was one for the gods.
yeah, that's for the live audience. That's why we have the live audience.
Hey,
that's
privileged content.
Exactly.
Sometimes
Patreon only content.
Sometimes I will be like, oh, that was a kind of cool tangent, but it was really personal and like about our lives. And like, no, that was just for the lives. That's what you get for not showing up to the lives. That's just not for you.
So today we've got returning Egwene's fanboy, right?
Hey everyone.
Is that what you want to go by again? Is that
Chad? Just go by Chad. I probably need to just change to Chad. Yeah, it's just easier.
It is a little easier, yeah.
Well, welcome back.
When I joined Discord, so I'm an old time member of Dragonmount when we used to have you actually were a character and could actually do like soft role playing, but not really role playing inside the. I guess it's still there. I'm assuming I don't go on, but I thought when I joined Discord, I had to have a handle. So that's why I came up with Egwene fanboy. But no, I'm fine with just being Chad. I prefer Chad. my love for Egwene is adamant.
A lot of people don't want their real names out there. They're just, privatized, and we trying to respect whatever name people request.
Try to dox people to the degree that they're comfortable.
Yeah. Well, I'm okay. I'm okay being Chad. Chad from Charlotte.
Cool. Well, we're glad to have you back to help
Thank
us
you.
break up the monotony of Perrin getting around to figuring out what he's going to do.
Oh, he discovers Malden. That's actually a big, check mark, road tick. We're halfway through this Perrin storyline, right? The first half was him finding Malden. The second half is him trying to recover Fail from the Shido, and the whole plan with the sea folk and the note and all that kind of stuff. So, which doesn't really happen until Knife of Dreams.
We are here today to do chapters 7 and 8 because it is that part of the plot where we're doing back-to-back double headers.
And I will say I have so little to say about chapter 7, right? I have some stuff in chapter 8, but my chapter 7 notes are light.
I had the exact same experience. That's one reason why I wanted to discuss some of the slog and kind of discuss, I guess, the literary analysis of Jordan as an author, not just the story or the fantasy part of it, because I feel like chapter 7 is. I don't understand why 7 and 8 aren't already, why it's not all just chapter 7, because there's so little that happens. And I guess the whole thing with chapter 7 is to prepare for the next thing. The encounter with Elias when they discover Malden. And I guess to have something of a showdown with Maseama. But I feel like that both the showdown with Maseama and I feel like the whole Darkhound thing are not developed enough and given enough details to make the chapter interesting or worthy on its own. And yet they also, because they're put in there so almost randomly, they almost feel like forced or cheap to me. But, that's my opinion on chapter 7 is I feel like it's just a wonky chapter that's set up wrong. And all of a sudden you get this random information about all these Darkhounds, and there's what she say, there's been 7 packs and this one's got 50 in them. And to me, I guess it's also like when I was reading it, I was a little bit like, wait a minute, there's that many Darkhounds just running across Randland?
Right?
That seems so strange to me.
Yeah, and just the way they dismiss it. They're just like, oh yeah, but this is the Darkhound information drop chapter, right? This is where we get...
Yes, absolutely, yes. Yeah. That's the real purpose of it. I just wish it was done a little less ham-fisted.
Maybe with more editing in the writing process, perchance.
Yes.
All right, chapter 7, Blacksmith's Puzzle, and our symbol is the Nodding Ravens. What is with the Nodding Ravens, by the way?
Yeah, because Nodding Ravens are dark friends, right?
They're usually the dark friends, usually something dark related. They're being watched by the dark. And I don't get any of that.
There's a lot of weird stuff about Annoura that always made me wonder if she was a dark friend in this chapter. She's super sus.
She really is.
Yeah, I was wondering that because I used to think when I saw the Ravens, when I was reading the books, that maybe it was indicating that someone in the storyline was a dark friend. But I don't know that anyone in this group is a dark friend, other than I do remember, like you mentioned the radio with, I used to have doubts about Annoura
but she's not, and that's not what she's doing. And yeah, it's odd.
So then the closest thing I have is that you just have like Darkhounds, and so these are animals of the dark, and so the ravens represent the Darkhounds.
Okay. Well, that's actually a good point, Seth, because I think sometimes in our awe of the story and the writing, we forget that there are actually, Robert Jordan was just an everyday man. Harriet was an everyday editor. Tor was a publisher. And whoever was picking out these chapter icons, at the time, they were necessarily thinking there'd be a podcast 30 years later, 20 years later that, is analyzing it. They were like, dark hounds. I will put ravens up there because they're dark friends.
Right. And my understanding is Harriet picked the chapter titles. I don't know who was picking the icons, if that was Harriet or somebody else.
This could also be for surveillance, because the Darkhounds and ravens are both used as, dark reconnaissance. So there could be that as kind of we've got mysterious surveillance happening from the dark. So here, let's use the ravens because... But I'm kind of fond of these ravens now, so...
Oh yeah, definitely fond of them. When the laughter cut off, Aram put on a smug grin, and with none of the fear scent he had given off earlier. Anyone would have thought he had already seen the tracks himself, and knew everything there was to know. No one paid any mind to his smirk, however, or to much of anything except the huge dog tracks impressed in stone. Even Perrin's explanation that the Darkhounds were long gone. Of course, he could not tell them how he knew that, yet no one seemed to notice the lack. One of the sharply slanting bars of early morning light was falling directly on the gray slab, illuminating it clearly. Stepper had grown accustomed to the fading burnt sulfur smell. At least he only snorted and laid back his ears. But the other horses shied at the tilted stone. None of the humans except Perrin could detect that smell, and most growled over their mounts' fractious behavior and peered at the oddly marked stone as if it were a curiosity displayed by a traveling show. Yeah, I honestly don't want to read too far into that. I just noticed Aram, I think, is putting on a smug grin because I think he's falling into the lie that Perrin is controlling the Darkhounds and that he's a dark friend and a shadow spawn himself, and this is just giving him confirmation.
Yes, I saw that. First off, I love the details of how the Darkhounds leave their footprints in the stone, and I just love the imagery of that and the way that just looks when you're reading that chapter and imagining that in your head of how it looks to find a stone, an oddly marked stone, but then you realize exactly what it is, and then Perrin, of course, is the perfect person to find it, and he, with his over sense of smell, his attachment to the wolves, and then when you find out that the Darkhounds were the souls of wolves, it's just a really nice way to kind of bring everything together. And if I had one piece of, I don't know, fake souvenir from World of Time, I would love a piece of stone with Darkhound prints in it. I think that'd be really cool.
Oh yeah. Well, I feel like it wouldn't be that hard, right? You just get some those kits they make where you put your footprint in a concrete powder or something like that, and that stuff just hardens,
and just get a mastiff or something.
Okay. Or timber.
Or timber. Yeah. My dogs are a little smaller than that, so they're not quite Darkhounds.
Well, I figure Timber's basically a Darkhound, right? He's pretty much all black. He's he definitely. If there's treats on the ground, he somehow slips between the shadows, eats them, and slips away without me noticing. Also, the cat poop out of the...
So he's part Myrdril, too.
Yeah, oh, yeah, definitely, yeah. All the Darkhounds are, so, he's...
There's these really cool tiles that are made in... I think they're made in Mexico. Maybe they're made in Italy. They're probably made in several places, but they have cat prints in them sort of randomly because of where they're made. There's just so many cats wandering around that every 1,000th tile that gets made has a cat print in it. And so they're just kind of these fun, lucky finds. And there was totally one in the bathroom that I was in when I was growing up. Nice. It was just two little cat prints.
That's cool.
Just in the tile, very artfully placed right in the center of the bathroom. So you couldn't help but notice it. And it was just... And then I read about Darkhound's the first time. I'm like, well, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, just like footprints in stone, it's a normal thing. But like, no, it's a very specific manufacturing flaw that isn't a flaw that would actually be creepy if it didn't come from like a known source,
But I have to wonder if that's not where the myth of the Darkhounds putting their paws in stone comes from, right? Like, is the idea, like, how many times have you seen concrete poured for a sidewalk and then you see like a line of dog footprints across it and then it hardens and you're like, oh, okay, some animal walked across this while it was hardening.
Well, I mean, some of our best dinosaur fossils are footprints in mud. Some of our best like early human fossils are footprints in mud. Some of our best archaeology of bizarre human events in history of oral tradition only are footprints in mud. Like it's a thing. And I mean, I also did the whole handprint in the sidewalk when the city replaced a chunk in front of my house. Like I definitely did that when I was a kid.
Right. Seth was definitely scrawled in a few items. Not necessarily concrete, but yeah.
I'm unfortunately old enough to remember when in kindergarten or first grade, we used to literally make handprints in plaster of Paris for Mother's Day gifts. So I think that's gone out the window a long time ago. Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
I haven't seen that in so long.
I don't know. I went to hippie school, so I can't tell you.
Well, I taught at hippie school as an adult, so I can relate to you on that end as well.
So I didn't have a lot in this opening bit. I saw that we see from all of these characters, the Aes Sedai, the Warders, the Wise Ones, the leader of the troops of Mayenne. There's just a lot of characters, and I'm not sure if I want to get into any of them.
I don't really. I got a whole page until I have a note.
Yeah, same.
I forget exactly where it is. The only thing I also feel like all these characters are listed and involved because what is really happening on some level is we're getting almost like a pecking order of who's really in charge of who. Because even like I think Annoura, when she goes down to look at the Darkhounds, like she has to like there's some wise one interaction there of like whether or not they're going to allow her to do that or whether or not she's going to exert herself. And so I feel like that's actually one of the things I do like about this chapter is I do feel like you get a lot of back scene kind of stuff going on that you have to kind of interpret is going on behind the scenes. So you kind of imagine, yourself in those shoes if this was happening, if your leader's wife was kidnapped, and how you would deal with that crisis, how you would deal with that story. So for me, and this is one thing, and it's actually, again, in large part because of you guys, but reading through these slog books this time, what I've decided to do is to kind of try to put myself in this position of where these people to kind of understand what they were actually would have been doing or feeling. And that's one of the advantages, I guess, of being 49, being the age I am. I've lived long enough to have a lot of different experiences. I've worked for city government. I've worked for state government. I've worked, in different levels. I've been, involved at various, crises or whatever. And so to kind of understand how I have experienced and seen people react in crises, and then to put myself in the position of these people, it's really made the slog a lot more interesting, in addition to also going through it with you guys. So to me, I kind of like that. That's one of the things I did find appealing about Chapter 7.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, because that was my first note was that there's no doubt who's in command between the Wise Ones and the Aes Sedai, but there seems to be doubt about them versus Perrin. That's a lot of what I was noting is, it's like a pecking order. It's totally like multiple chicken flocks figuring out how all the little subflocks are going to line up in the big flock. It's totally that. And it's boring in terms of the number of words, but yeah, that is the tapestry that Perrin is ultimately weaving together.
It's like when they say somehow the Aes Sedai always know who's in charge and who's not. And part of that's sensing power, but part of that's this constant social testing and fighting and back and forth and this knowledge of oh, they have this advantage, I have that advantage. How do those two play off against each other, and who do I have to obey versus who can I just sort of give lip service to versus who can I command? And I feel like that all is constantly moving.
I think that's exactly right. I completely agree with everything you said, Seth. And the other thing I think is so interesting is because, it doesn't take long of working with people to understand, first of all, people suck, but also that crises always present opportunities. And especially in politics or government or whatever, there's always going to be someone who's going to see this crises as a way of jockeying for position or securing position or advancing an agenda. And, no one knows that better than Aes Sedai, especially, and I believe Annoura's a gray Aes Sedai, so she's, a little more political as well. She understands negotiations. Annoura and Greys are probably always well aware of exactly the order in any room they walk into. They would love the priority of people like, places like United Kingdom have, where it actually tells you who's in what order. I feel like Greys would love that because they have to size that up, because that's a key part of their job of negotiating, is making sure they understand the internal politics and levels of power that are going on underneath the surface.
But I feel like Annoura is a great red herring for Black Aja, right? She either was one, and and Jordan either forgot to mention that, or Sanderson changed it, or it's just like, this is a person acting weird, and you're supposed to think she's Black Aja, even if she's not, just because of this weird back and forth behavior with Maseama and what appears to be, not necessarily lying, but hedging the truth with Perrin. Like, you're just like, something's going on with her.
Well, I actually have a theory, Seth.
Never knowing her motivation. Oh, go for it. Yeah, give me a theory. What's her motivation?
I think Annoura might have been Demandred at one point.
Annoura Dread. I'm into it.
Annoura Dread. Let's get it going. Ch7&8, Tame, Annoura.
What I'm going to go with is that Annoura has an actual crush on Berylane and isn't willing to admit it, but is doing a lot of stuff to and that's what puts her in this very weird position, because she has these cross motivations.
I'm pretty sure I've heard this before. I don't remember if we came up with it on the podcast or if I read it on another server.
It's not an original idea. I don't know where I saw it.
I totally can ship Annoura having an unrequited crush on Berylane. Because, she burns herself out bringing the man Berylane is crushing on back to her. It's just...
Right.
Look what I did for you. Won't you love me now?
But,
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
And supposedly, everything we know about Berylane is she's supposedly that kind of beauty, that kind of woman.
Right.
The kind that,
that you will sacrifice yourself for.
Right. And that pulls attractors from regardless of the spectrum. Wherever you are on the spectrum of sexuality.
Everyone's Berylane.
Berylaine's everyone's type. That's pretty much.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, she's that one
Berylane
chick
is
from
everyone's
Rent.
type.
Yeah.
She's the Gal Gadot of...
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yes.
Actually, that would make a great Berylane.
Yeah.
Actor. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
So anyway, there's a lot of relationship stuff, but I think what I want to talk about most is the lore.
We get the lore about salting the dogs' ears, which is one of the best things ever. Sprinkle salt on the Darkhound's ears and they'll go away. These big slavering dogs trying to eat your face off with their poison saliva, and you're trying to salt bay onto them.
That may be a myth.
Yes, it is. It is debunked as a myth, but one page later on. But I like the vision nonetheless.
It's definitely got this feeling of old wives' tale kind of thing.
Yes.
But we get actual information from Masuri. And so I'm just going to read her whole speech because I think it's a cool little chunk of information, because we get two bits of information about Darkhounds in this chapter and the next one. This one from Masuri and then the next one from Elias.
Yeah.
And I really feel like this rounds out what Darkhounds are in this episode, because before we've seen them, but it's been really light. We also get some stuff in the last battle where we find out there are the two different kinds of Darkhounds, the ones that are sort of your generic Darkhounds, and then the ones that participate in the last hunt. And the ones that participate in the last hunt are the ones that are much more invulnerable, much harder to kill, much harder to take out. And so it's hard to tell. It seems like this is part of the Great Hunt for the first time.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. So they're actually on the loose and they're looking, which is why there's so many more of them, and why there's such
That's
a
what
unique,
I would think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that also would explain too, because what I always got from what she couldn't tell, I believe, like who the focus was or who the prey was, I think is what she says. And to me, that actually explains it really well, Seth, because if they're part of the final hunt or whatever it's called, the Great Hunt, you know, they're a little more, I guess, like organic or independently moving. So when they're pawing around looking for stuff, they themselves are not quite sure. They don't have one purpose like most Darkhound hunts would have. Their purpose is the last battle. So therefore they're kind of looking around for, I guess, like ways to work themselves into that.
That's entirely possible. I've sort of come to my headcanon that they're after Rand, that they've just been sent out by Ch7&8 to kill Rand and hunt him down. And because he's popping all over the place with gateways, they're just incredibly frustrated and like just running all over the place. And like, we get the line here that they'll ignore any other prey, no matter how important, for the target. And so I'm sort of coming to the conclusion. It's either Fain or Rand, right? I think one or the other.
Yeah, I was coming to a similar conclusion. What else can you hunt for a very long time and have no luck tracking? Someone who can travel and is Ta'veren. Fain is also just such a wild card that, like, maybe he needs to be put down, and so you're sending, like, all the Darkhounds after him because maybe they can do it, but Rand seems like the logical target. Okay,
so you think the Darkhound's presence is completely superfluous to Perrin and what's going on with everything else? You think it has nothing to do with that?
Almost everything to do with Perrin is superfluous at this point. So.
Okay, that's true.
So yeah, Seth, you going to read us a lore dump?
Yeah. Relatively little is known of Darkhounds, but I've made something of a study of them in a small way. Over the years, I have crossed the paths of 7 packs, 5 of them twice, and 2 others 3 times. Some ancient writers say there are only 7 packs, others say 9 or 13, or some other number they believed had special significance. But during the Trollic Wars, Sorelia Alana Al-Sahan, Soralana Al-Sahan wrote of the 100 packs of the Shadow's Hounds that hunt the night, and even earlier, Ivanal Britaraya. Wow, they are just killing me with the names this time.
It's fine. No one does any better, I don't think. Even the audiobooks, it's like, well, that was a set of syllables that happened.
Ivanal Bariti supposedly wrote of hounds born of the shadow in numbers like unto the nightmares of mankind, though in truth Avanel herself may be apocryphal. In any case, the smell is not the right word, and neither is flavor. The sense of each pack is unique, and I can say with certainty that I have never encountered this one before, so we know the number 7 is wrong. Whether the correct number is 9 or 13 or something else, tales of Darkhounds are much more common than Darkhounds themselves, and they are extremely rare this far south of the Blight. A second rarity, there may have been as many as 50 in this pack. 10 or 12 is the usual limit. A useful maxim. 2 rarities combined call for close attention. There's always a feel of urgency about Darkhound's trails, but it varies according to a number of factors, not all of which I can be certain of. This one has an intense admixture of, I suppose you would call it, impatience. That isn't really strong enough by far, as well call a stab wound a pinprick, but it will do. I would say their hunt has been going on for some time, and their prey is eluding them somehow. No matter what the stories say, by the way, Lord Galleon, salt doesn't harm Darkhounds in the least. Despite the stories, they never hunt at random, though they will kill if the opportunity presents itself and doesn't interfere with the hunt. With Darkhounds, the hunt is paramount. Their quarry is always important to the Shadow, though at times we cannot see why. They have been known to bypass the great and mighty to slay a farm wife or craftsman, or to enter a town or village and leave without killing, though clearly they came for some reason. My first thought for what brought them here had to be discarded since they moved on. Her gaze flickered towards Perrin so quickly he was not sure anyone else noticed.
Oh, they did.
Given that, I strongly doubt they will return. Oh yes, they are an hour or more gone. That, I'm afraid, is really all I can tell you.
Yeah, other people notice that flicker because everyone is thinking it, Perrin.
Yeah.
Nobody, I repeat to you, exactly nobody in your army of loyal followers doesn't remember you are Ta'Veren at all times.
Yeah.
Well, I think you'd almost have to. I mean, it has to be part of a survival of life, you know, to know that your leader is Ta'Veren and can attract both good and bad random instances of the will.
Yeah. Yeah, everyone is assuming, well, just because we have Perrin Golden Eyes as our leader. Like, that's why the Darkhounds are here. Like, obviously. Mm-hmm. Even Maseama assumes it. I mean, everyone assumes it.
And we learn later there is no special number to the number of packs, right? There can easily be another pack created if there's another pack of wolves that are killed.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like,
the number has fluctuated over time, presumably.
right, yeah. It's not a set number or anything like that.
No, but of course the lore around them, because they rarely ever actually interact with the world, of course the lore around them has taken on significances that don't exist. Like, come on, obviously.
But how many people have been killed by the wolves and you just never find out?
Well, I mean, clearly every weird animal in the woods is, you know, like Sasquatch out here, right in the Pacific Northwest. Like if there's a bear that runs up a tree that you just didn't quite get a good look of, clearly that was Sasquatch. Obviously. Presumably in this world, Darkhounds get blamed for a lot of, well, I saw a sort of canid form running away from the scene of the crime, but it was definitely bigger and scarier than any dog, so it must have been a Darkhound. Like, how many wolves have been accused of being Darkhounds just because people are like that?
Oh, my favorite Easter egg is in when Eye of the World, when they're constantly complaining about the wolves killing livestock, and you realize it's not wolves because the wolves aren't around. It's the Trollocs that have been hiding up in the mountains.
Oh, yes.
And you're like, oh, it's not a particularly bad year for wolves. It's actually all the Trollocs who are killing them and making it look like wolves are doing it.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of wolfy Trollocs, too. So, you know, it is kind of wolfy.
Oh, true.
Sure.
I'm sure there are some of them that are wolfy.
There's some
one or
wolf hairs
two.
left behind. Yeah.
And also, just like, okay, and again, I'm sure this is nothing revelatory or anything, but I want to make sure. I always, the way Dragcar were Robert Jordan's attempt to say this is a possible source of Dracula myths. I always thought Darkhounds were a possible werewolf, like the origin of werewolves or whatever else. Or the connection of werewolves from our world to, or our myths to his world. So,
see, I always thought Wolf Brothers were more of his attempt to explain werewolves, and Darkhounds were more just like the Great Hunt and all the myths that we have about that, and, you know, shadow creatures of the night and things like that.
okay. I definitely see what you're saying as far as I actually agree with you as far as the man part of it. I guess I was thinking more of this evil, you know, wolf that's larger than other wolves or whatever, the wolf side of the werewolf side.
Sure.
But yeah,
sure.
Either way, I mean.
Well,
yeah.
and there's nothing to say that those two myths didn't merge together into our modern werewolf myth, right? Like, that's sort of how he writes, is like, no one character is Thor, right? He takes Thor's attributes and smears them about between a couple of different characters. And no one character only has the attributes of Thor, right? No, Matt isn't just Odin. He's Odin plus a bunch of other stuff.
Right. Which I love about his writing too, because, you know, that's one of the things I feel like I've discovered, you know, having lived as long as I have, is that's actually, you know, more how life tends to be. You know, it's never any one thing. It is, you find truth smeared across, you know, like a nice piece of a jam on toast, you know.
That was literally something to the effect of a quote at the beginning of one of my geology textbooks about rock classification.
Oh, really?
And it was like, look, this is a whole ass book. This is the 123rd anniversary edition of this book about minerals. And we've broken all the minerals down, all the rocks down. Rocks don't read books. So what you
Yes.
find out there, right? What you find in real, like, it's not, like, this is just an approximation. Like, what you find in nature is not what we're going to be delineating here. Like, it's just, everything is a big smeary mess between like 7 different end members, and we're just roughing it in at this point.
Right.
So yeah, it's true in hard science. It's true in the softest and squishiest of human sciences. Like, it's just, nothing is clean and neat.
it's true of life and nature. That's how like life winds up being. And I think that's one thing that bothers so many, not just, right versus left or, or even, boomers versus Gen Z is the ability of people to understand that, even sometimes those truisms we were taught or memorized, they were taught or memorized for a specific purpose, which was to teach us something, but that doesn't mean they were all inclusive of all answers. And I think it's that uncomfortableness of the messiness of reality and the lack of, closure sometimes, or lack of everything fitting in a neat box, that makes people so, anti-education, they get on these swings, because really what they're really against is change that's different from what they have always been comfortable with.
Right. And then if they get too carried away with that, they end up in a cult riding through the snow over one of their own members as they go to confront the hero of our story, which is basically where I'm at in the book next, is Maseama riding up and Perrin's party responding.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a little chunk here where they're like, Maseama's coming, and then there's like 2 pages of nothing, and then he shows up. More Annoura stuff, right? But just a lot of parents, camp followers going back and forth about what they think, and he's like, don't do anything unless I tell you, and they're like, oh, but we have been meeting with him in secret, so there's a lot of subtext going on there in those conversations, but they're not. Just because that storyline never goes anywhere, those characters never end up doing anything significant,
I was about to say the same thing. I think Maseama is such a bad, he's such a wasted potential that you either needed to have killed him off early, or if you're not going to actually fulfill that potential. I think having Maseama come in and, actually create even or take over the White Cloaks, or rivalry, religious organization of the White Cloaks, anything like that would have been so much more interesting than the way it panned out. I just feel like it was just it just kind of evolved into melted jello, the whole Maseama story. I'm just not a fan of Maseama.
Yeah, Maseama and Fain are both so they fizzle out. It just it was going to be a boom.
What if they could have gotten together?
Oh no.
Imagine Maseama influenced by Fain.
Nightmare fuel.
It would have almost been you have, a crazy leader being influenced by, someone behind the scenes that's really dark and dastardly.
And don't forget, he is being influenced by Grendel, right? So in a lot of ways, he is being influenced by someone behind the scenes who's dark and dastardly. That's part of why he's doing all this irrational crap.
That's true.
Yeah, the cult would have a literal evil fog that would spread with it and infect people's minds. It wouldn't just be normal cult mind shit. It would be a literal fog that gets into your heads. I hate this.
Well, and also if Fain and Arid Hall or whatever represent the evil that men do, I think religious fanaticism definitely is in that category of the evil that men do.
That's true.
So, okay, here's an alternate history. Imagine in Faldara, back in book 2, end of book 1, right? Fain breaks into prison. Who goes down to visit him? Maseama. The ghost that is not Mashadar, but the Mordeith jumps into Maseama. And that's how you end up. And then Maseama goes on to do the cult leader thing.
I love that.
And then all of his cult followers become part of the new Mashadar. And that's where he gets his souls.
Mobile. He's not stuck in the ground anymore. He's pulled a Tuatha on and made himself mobile. Oh, I hate this. That would be awful.
And then you kill Fain off early, but you have this person, Mordeith jumping from person to person now that he's free, right? But he's got the taint of whatever it was that the Dark One did to Fain on him. And so you have this.
I love that.
Oh, and they would hate each other. You'd have the two golem thing because, it's evil versus human evil. It's existential evil versus human evil. So they would hate each other and be, that would be so much drama, so much evil drama.
Yeah, it's chaos versus selfishness.
Yeah.
I wanted Fain to grow into a much more powerful force in the Wheel of Time because I wanted there to be two big evils, right? I wanted this to be like, you can't just beat the one bad guy and be done with and win the last battle, right?
Well, and I think was it last week's episode that you were talking about at the last battle for if Fain would have been able to be like basically take over the Dark One, if Rand would have killed the Dark One, and then Fain would have lashed out. I mean, that was such a great. I completely agree with you. I think that definitely would have been. I think Fain should have been much more utilized. And it's like I would love. I don't know. I don't want to say fan fiction, but I wish that we could. Do you guys remember, Seth? You probably remember this. Do you remember when Star Wars back in the 80s, 90s had this amazing breadth of EU books that were not official but authored? Yeah, it was.
I mean, they were official. They got de-officialized, but they were official at the time. Yeah,
right. I guess what I meant was they didn't have to necessarily come. Like they didn't have to be approved by Lucas or whatever. What I was trying to say.
Yeah.
You know, they were licensed or whatever. But I wish we could get something like that with the Wheel of Time, because I think it would really like enhance Jordan's legacy to have like other authors contributing to the story. And I think the way the Star Wars fandom always approached the extended universe of Star Wars was these are possibilities, but it never got into like real fighting about what's the real canon. It was all kind of just like, well, if you like this story, then you just read the story. But it was a way to keep that going on. I would love to see something like that with, Fain, and how, something more, a development, another side of that.
I mean, it's what I saw with Dragonlance, that you can have this like extremely, you can have lots of authors write lots of stories in this established world. And they're going to be of mixed quality. That's the thing you are going to have to accept, is once you start letting other people dip their toes in, you cannot do the quality control, and you cannot be sure that they're all going to be good. Some of them are going to be terrible. But that means some of them are going to be amazing. And I'd be willing to sacrifice reading some really crappy fan fiction written by other authors for some really good fan fiction written by other authors.
Right. And what a way to get like the Outrigger novels finally, or to find out, more about the story. Is Lanfear really alive? Which we all know she's not. That was a bad day.
Who's going to kill her for real?
Oh my God. So again, that's one of the reasons I had to redo my listen to the last 5 books. No, she's fucking dead. There's
Thank you.
Yeah, there's nothing in there that her desperation is clearly because she's, lost all her resources. All of her tricks have failed. And if you take away Perrin breaking free of her compulsion, you take away all of his skills in the world of dreams, which doesn't make sense from the character building. And it's just and that's what he did. That was his role in the last battle. You can't, it doesn't. If
you aren't going to kill Perrin properly,
it doesn't make sense.
You can't take his one victory away from him like that.
Right. Yes. Yeah, I completely agree. What happened, Seth and Aradia, with Fain and the White Cloaks? Did that story ever come to any resolution? Or was it just because they were defeated in the Two Rivers?
No, because he put all his energy onto Niall. He put all of his scheming onto Niall, as I recall.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And so when Niall was gone, it all just kind of unraveled.
Yeah, he took a few White Cloaks with him, but they're part of him now. They don't stay with the White Cloaks.
They were his thralls, and there was a scene where they were eventually all... There's a point where he's walking and he's lost all of his Trollocs and all of his White Cloaks. They've all died. Right, there's a point where they're just all dead, so the ones he took, eventually he killed off, and the ones he didn't take, they probably have the taint and the mistrust and all that kind of crap, but, Galad kills a couple of them. So he once they're no longer useful for his trap for Rand in the Two Rivers, he abandons them.
That's the key. I always forget that the Fain was never truly operating under his own devices. He was a hound for Rand. I forget that. That's one reason why his story didn't ever develop. I think maybe more into that alternative Dark One. Now that you said that, is because that would have always been a distraction from his focus, which is killing Rand.
And it's something he struggles with, right? It's And there's that moment when the Fade is trying to go north to Sheo Ghul, and Fain has to go with him, and then Mordeth becomes powerful enough that he can turn him back south again, or back west, or whatever it was. And so there's that struggle that's going on, and the Mordeth part of Fain is constantly getting stronger, whereas I think he's finally able to overcome the compulsion to follow Rand. But it still, like, pains him, and so he still wants to, like, be the one to kill Rand, because he hates having that compulsion in him.
Because I think he describes it as an itch somewhere, doesn't he?
Yeah, something like that.
Cool. Okay, so back to chapter 7, sorry.
Right.
Yeah, so Maseama rolls up, and the group tries to take a defensive position because they don't like him. Yeah, he runs over one of his own people. Aram smells excited.
Yes.
Beginning of the corruption.
We were noting in the last 2 chapters that the smells that Aram is giving off, that the last glimmer of hope for him and Perrin's relationship has guttered out, and now he is now open to being completely taken over by Maseama. What was an exploration is now the only option left to him, and he smells excited. He smelled hurt and cynical and alone in the last chapter, and he smells excited in this chapter. So yeah, that means that it's over for Perrin's opportunity to redeem him.
But it's just like, it's such a missed opportunity for Perrin to do the right thing. Like, all he had to do was to be nice to Aram and be a good mentor. I mean, be a good teacher. Like, it literally would have cost him nothing and would have won the world for Aram. All Aram wants is to belong. He wants someone to guide him and lead him. And it's almost unforgivable on Perrin's part, but also a reminder of exactly how immature Perrin actually is. He's still only early 20s.
Him and Aram are the same age, give or take.
Oh shit, are they?
Yeah.
Pretty much.
God, I completely forgot. You're right. No, that makes sense. Yeah, because they met in book 1.
They end up in a very like mentor-mentee relationship, but they are actually the same age. They have the same life experience in terms of just sheer time on this earth.
So even more so, then Perrin didn't even need to look at him. He could have just looked at him as a friend. Just be nice to the guy, and he would have probably won him over. You know, make him a colleague, have a beer.
And in a lot of ways, Fail was the one who was managing those kind of relationships. And so I think Aram's disintegration is sort of a way to show that Perrin without Fail can't manage these kinds of mentor relationships, and can't, this is sort of what Perrin needs Fail for, because he's, the autistic guy who can't, manage emotions and the people around him. He needs his wife to do that for him, even though he smells them.
That's such a good take. That's such a good take. I literally had to applaud. That was such a good take on, and also it makes me actually respect and like Fail and her involvement more. Like, which I think Fail gets a really bad shake for people not liking her. I don't think she should be as unlikable as what she is.
RJ didn't do her a lot of favors, but yeah.
No, I like her quite a bit. Yeah, no, and I think the reason people don't like it is because of these or don't like her is because of these chapters, and it's like, well, Fail's not even in them.
Right.
Well, he's looking for her, and they blame her for that. It's
yes.
Like, blame Perrin, not Fail, for Perrin being a dumbass, right? Like,
right, yeah, totally.
So I feel it's a very, I'd almost call it out as a little misogynistic, right? It's this idea that, we can't blame the guy for being an idiot about a woman. We have to blame the woman. And she's like, I'm just here. He's the one being an idiot. Mm-hmm. Like, stop it.
Well, if she really cared, she wouldn't have gotten kidnapped.
Oh, right.
Oh,
that's how that works.
Well, she was probably walking in the wrong place and dressed inappropriately.
Well, she left his side. She left the camp.
She was asking to be kidnapped.
She left her gilded cage.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, it's completely on her.
Unacceptable. Unacceptable.
Yeah.
Maseama shows up with a bunch of extra people, right? He's supposed to show up with 100 soldiers. He shows up with 200 to 300. I hesitate to call them soldiers.
Followers with sharp things.
Yeah. Rabble. Rabble's a really good word.
Yeah, rabble is very, very accurate.
Townsfolk with pitchforks.
It's a mob. It's the people that got in line behind Gaston in Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah, totally. And his smell is pure insanity, because one way and another, yeah, that makes sense.
Oh, Yeah, I made note of this. I wanted to ask you. You were talking about Aram feeling excited, and I was wondering what you guys thought about how much that excitement is related to the fanatical insanity, and is Aram getting excited because of the fanaticism, or is he also starting to become insane because of the fanaticism?
Same. 6 up, half a dozen down.
Okay.
He's bought into it, right? And so he's just like excited. He wants to see a confrontation between the two of them, I think, at this point. Yeah, I don't really. It's hard to. I can't. I have a hard time getting in the mind of someone who would believe Maseama's bullshit. So it's hard to really know what he's thinking, because I'm just like, what are you doing? Like, this man took you in, protected you, has treated you like basically a brother, and you're like turning against him because he has, weird colored eyes. Fuck you, dude.
Right.
Well, I think what's happening is that he's seeking for something to fill this hole, and Perrin's not giving it to him. And there is something really seductive and addictive about fanaticism for filling that hole. He's got a bottomless pit inside him, and that kind of fanaticism is an endless fountain. That's
exactly what I kind of was thinking too, Aradia. And, I grew up very religious and very around, religious fanaticism in some ways. And I kind of like saw that too. That's why I was kind of asking, because to me, what he's exhibiting, I think he's completely sane. I think he's exhibiting that mania that comes with religious fanaticism, because all of a sudden it's so great, especially if you already feel hurt, and, Aram is the original incel, and, he's already feeling dejected and not a part of community. And now here's this, all of a sudden everything is very clear. It's very simple. It's very black and white. You don't have to do a lot of processing. Things aren't complex, and you can just kind of buy into it. It gives you purpose and gives you goals and gives you structure. And I think that's definitely something that I saw, in religion and I'm not trying to hate on religion.
Oh, feel free. We do that all the time on this podcast.
But I do know that it's also there. And I feel like, okay. Not a fan of religion. I love religious history. I love theology, but not a fan of religion.
Yeah, it fills up a hole, and he has a really gaping hole in him. And Perrin is just like, nah, dude, figure it out. Well, the shiny thing that is within arm's reach is how I'm going to figure it out.
So, okay, what the hell is the point of this confrontation between Perrin and Maseama? Are they literally just to be like exchanging insults and then riding away?
I thought it was kind of Jordan's way of like info dumping, because basically the whole point is letting them know that So Harbor's there, right? So I thought that's what the whole purpose of it was it was his way of kind of doing an info dump, and Maseama was the dumper.
The dumpy. Yeah. Yeah, because that is all that happens, is that he tells Perrin that So Harbor is a day back and has the resources that we need. So it's a ploy to get Perrin to slow down, but there is a slight vibe that maybe he was hoping to get lucky and spring an attack, but everyone's just a little bit too well armed, so they have, a standoff and just trade information instead.
Yeah, the whole standoff thing really unnerved me.
When we come back to Perrin in Crossroads of Twilight Chapter 25, it's all about buying grain from So Harbor. That's what that little arc is. So I guess this is just sort of setting up the next arc with Perrin that we have at the end of Crossroads of Twilight.
And also, there's something in here, too, about the whole Berlane rumor, too, right? Maseama's heard the Berlane rumor.
Yeah.
Berlane rumor.
Yeah, and he's like casting
kind of like,
aspersing glances and stuff.
Aspersions, yes.
Right.
He's clutching his pearls.
Yeah, he literally takes the time to like do a little pearl clutching. It's just like, what the fuck, dude?
It's like, yes, Maseama, you paragon of morals. You of all people.
Yeah, well, he believes in the sanctity of marriage. Also the sanctity of murdering people he disagrees with. But,
Right.
Okay, where are we at this point?
Maseama has come on. They talked about So Harbor.
Yeah, I've got like a page left in the chapter.
I have nothing really left. There's just...
Yeah, because basically, what's his name? Guard guy, he's riding out.
Oh, Gallian. No,
and then it sets up. It's
Jesus.
Arganda.
Yeah, Arganda. He's this hyphen on the page.
Arganda,
I'm like,
which
what the
sets
fuck
up
is this
chapter
word?
8, which is when Elias comes back.
Yeah, it's another chapter switch that's just like, and a new player on the stage, so scene change. The camera angle switches, and thus we get a chapter break.
I like the way you described that too. That's very well said. That's exactly what I see. It's almost like the books are written as, I guess, from a showrunner's point of view. You know, the camera changes, and we're seeing a different part of the story.
I've always thought so.
It's why I always thought it would make a really good show shot for shot, right? I mean, it would be immense, and like we could never actually get it because it would have to be the 26 episode seasons.
If I had infinite money, that's what I would do with it.
And we had 7 or 8 seasons, or not, if not more, to get all of it in.
Oh, you need at least one per book, Seth. We need 14 seasons of 26 episodes apiece.
Yeah.
I do think you could probably combine Crossroads of Twilight and Winter's Heart and maybe even do a little compression in books 2 and 3, right? I think I think 2 and 3, 6 and 7, and then whatever these are, 8 and 9 can definitely be put together. 8, 9, 10 can almost be sort of squished probably into one season, I bet.
Especially if you take all the boring parts of Perrin moping around in the snow and
all the expositions for transitioning between those books, all that exposition you can just skip.
Yes.
That takes out like a third of the words right there.
So basically, this chapter ends with Elias and Aiel coming into view. What happens? Does Maseama leave? Yeah.
So basically what happens is Arganda gets sent off to bring more troops from the camp. He arrives with those troops at the confrontation with Maseama, and then at that same moment, he spots Elias and the maiden coming back and goes running off to meet them, and thus effectively drops off the army and picks up the leadership, and they all go tearing off to meet up with Elias. And then kind of the whole army sort of like drags its ass over and like reforms around them because Maseema's still right there being like, bro, I'm dangerous. Hello. Hi.
Did Maseama go with them to go meet Elias?
No, he kind of like...
You can say Elias or Elias?
Elias. Yeah, he just kind of wanders back to his camp, I think.
That's what I thought too. I was like, I don't think he gets picked up with anyone else.
Not at all. He's just kind of like, oh, I guess I'm not important anymore, and just like wanders off. Oh, and yeah, because he turns around and takes him away, and then you see the followers stop to throw the body of their comrade aside like trash and then butcher the horse. Because, Maseama is leading them all away. And then, the leadership of this army goes tearing off to visit with Elias and learn a bunch of information about Malden. Yay.
So that brings us to chapter 8, Whirlpools of Color, and our symbol is the ancient symbol of the Aes Sedai.
Because this is the moment that the channeling of the cleansing gets initiated.
Right. Plus, it's when we learn that there's a ton of channelers in Malden.
Yeah, there's like 420-ish.
Ish, yeah. A very magical number.
Oh, 420, yeah.
Somewhere around there.
Which, if you think about it, okay, they said every wise woman that can channel is with the Shido. And the Shido is one of, 13 clans?
The biggest of 13.
Okay, so the biggest of 13. So let's say everyone has, let's be conservative, say half. So we're saying, I mean, that's like what, 10 times what the White Tower is right now? Like just wandering around the Isle Waste? I mean, that's
all trained.
That's an insane number.
All accounted for, all protected.
They don't miss any.
Yeah, the Aes Sedai are so bad at their jobs.
Oh, so bad. Well, and I think, again, it's one of the legacies that you guys have given me. And again, Morgan, because I keep quoting you guys. I honestly think if Jordan was writing it now, I think he would have had to have given the Aes Sedai a little bit more effectiveness and a little more purpose. Like, it doesn't make sense that all the advisors are gray, or that yellows aren't doing hospitals, or greens aren't all up in the borderlands. Like, you're right. None of this makes sense.
Well, but I think he's making a point. I think he's making a point about how the ivory tower has led them to be isolated. They're literally in an ivory tower. They are isolated. They are ineffective. They are corrupt. They have what, a third of them are dark friends. Like, they've been, yes, if they were an effective force that was, living in a world that was not retreating into chaos and death, they would be written differently. But they are. People are retreating. Humanity is retreating, and the Aes Sedai are not doing their jobs, because if they were, humanity wouldn't be retreating.
Okay. I mean, I definitely see that point, and obviously we know that point is definitely based on reality. So we're back with Elias and the Maiden, and they're coming up with numbers, I think.
Right. So yeah, everybody sprints off to go, be like, what did you find? Because they know that the two of them returning by themselves mean that something was found and everybody else stayed to scout. Right. So this is the preliminary information, and it's what's going on. Elias says, we found the shadow we've been following. They've camped around a fair-sized town they took. That's Malden. But it's a lot more than they thought it was. It's 9 or 10 steps. It may be as many as 10,000 Algaida Siswai, right? As many as 10,000 fighters.
Which, again, understanding the scale of that, like, that's a huge number of people to be in one place, and especially when you're assuming, especially most things in Randland are not on that level of scale. I mean, that's literally a wandering city in Randland.
Yeah, it's a lot of people, and then that's just the fighting force. That's not the entire population. Like, that's a lot. That's a huge army to have just kind of embedded right there.
Also, I forget, are there still Shido in the waste? Like, they leave any, like, blacksmiths or, hold mistresses or anything back? Or did they have everyone? Did they kind of evacuate?
As far as I can tell, they evacuated. They don't have anybody left behind. The entire clan was with Couladin. They've been split up. They've been obviously gatewayed all over the place. So there's groups of them everywhere. But I think that we can pretty much assume the rest of the groups were killed.
Well, I never actually thought about that. I always assumed that they left some people behind, but yeah, I guess they do kind of put all their eggs in one Couladin-shaped basket.
Savannah-shaped double basket?
Yeah, with the false bottom.
Yeah, maybe with a wire under cup, perhaps?
Yeah. So They talk about a ransom. Could we ransom our people back? And everyone says, well, to judge by the evidence of the fact that no one around here has survived via a ransom, no, let's not give away our one strategic advantage and do the thing that clearly won't work. Also, like, Perrin doesn't want to negotiate with people who have scared his wife, which, like, sure, that makes sense. I can see not wanting to pay them for screwing your life up, especially when it's unlikely to work.
Perrin was the original, we don't negotiate with terrorists.
Right, basically. But it's like 4 pages of, like, we don't negotiate with terrorists. Like, them discussing it and then him saying no. And it's just like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. It's nice that Barrelane says, I will buy your wife for you. But, like, great, whatever. Moving on. And then he says, I want to go see the camp. Elias is like, good luck with that, bro, but let's go. And they head off. Or they send everyone to go get ready to, like, do the gateway through and stuff. And then Perrin and Elias get some time alone, and we get our second dump of info about Darkhounds.
I did like this line. He had to keep moving. There had to be a way. His mind darted like a caged rat. And I'm like, Perrin, mind darting like a caged rat? When is he ever described? He's always slow of thought, always very deliberate, right? Like, this is so out of character for him right now. He is panicking because he's just been told what he thought was a very tough battle is essentially an impossible battle.
Well, and I think that's, I think what's interesting, and I applaud Jordan's commitment, is, once that decision was made, that these were the odds, he stuck with it through the entire story. because Perrin truly had to find something outside of all normalcy to win this. I mean, who would have thought, he would have partnered up with channelers and, the fucking Shanshan, so I do appreciate Jordan's commitment to this. And that's one thing I will say, like, I think there are better ways of handling this to make it less sloggy, but the outcome of Perrin being another outlet to bring the Shanshan to Rand, and to see a side of them, was a really good thing and a good outcome of that.
Yeah, I really like what he was doing here, which is having Perrin put together all these different forces into one army. And I think it actually wasn't used enough in the last battle, which is Perrin having like this sort of battleship leadership over all these different groups, right? Like the whole Moraine coming in and uniting people and forging them together and her being key to the last battle. I think Perrin would have been better served in that role of him coming in and forging people together and him being instrumental to the last battle because he has experience forging together these different groups and him being, well, if I can get these groups to work together, I can do it for all these other groups. And like, and also the way he believes Rand with the fact that the seals needed to be broken, right? Like Perrin could have been so useful. I really feel like Perrin was underused in the last battle.
I think you're right, and I'm actually going to. I'm going to give even more support to your theory. Is if you go back to Perrin's arc in Shadow Rising, where he builds an army out of the Two Rivers men. That's one of my favorite series, is because you really get this organic look at how an army or a nation might actually develop under a strong leader who's just doing what he has to do to rescue people. And I think that when the leveling up, we go from Perrin on that like 2-dimensional level to then a 3-dimensional level where he's got these Gildanan and Mayeners and whoever else is behind him, all pulling in together.
The White Cloaks.
Yeah, the White Cloaks. And then to do that on the universal scale, the 4th dimension, I agree with you completely. So I think it's a great theory. And I think it would have shown a natural escalation and been a much better use of his storyline than him running around with a purple umbrella, fighting Lanfear and whatever else. So.
Right. Yeah. Because he would have been, Matt, I think Rand should have been off fighting the Dark One. Matt is the general, but Perrin is the one who's, forging the forces together to give to Matt. Like, Matt's not the one who's assembling the forces.
Perrin is the blacksmith. He's hammering the forces together on the anvil and preparing a weapon. He's creating the weapon for Matt to use.
Exactly.
Oh. God, Seth, this is genius. Look at this.
I'm telling you, there were things that I thought the end of the story could have gone. And I think there were places where Jordan was foreshadowing they should have gone that I don't always think that Sanderson followed through on. Because he just didn't know. He wasn't Jordan.
And that's exactly, I think, what I was trying to say. And I think what I agree with you is it's not so much that Sanderson's writing is inferior to Jordan. It's just he's such a different person with a different experience and even different motivation for writing that he can't step into those shoes. He did not walk in Robert Jordan's shoes to live the life Robert Jordan lived to become the writer Robert Jordan was. His work was always going to be a different piece because he comes at it from a different perspective. But I do agree with you because I think the whole forging and the blacksmith, that just rings so true of Jordan to me. I have to believe that he would have set that up in some way.
So I want to read a lot, just like I read Masuri's speech about the Darkhounds. I want to read all of Elias's. Most tales of Darkhounds are just people frightened by the dark. They were wolves once, the souls of wolves anyway, caught and twisted by the Chateau. That was the core used to make Darkhounds, the Shadow Brothers. I think that's why the wolves have to be at the last battle. Or maybe Darkhounds were made because the wolves will be there to fight them. The pattern makes Savora lace look like a piece of string sometimes. Anyway, it was a long time ago during the Trolloc Wars, as near as I can make out, and the War of Shadow before that. Wolves have long memories. What a wolf knows is never really forgotten, while other wolves remain alive. They avoid talking about Darkhounds, though, and they avoid Darkhounds too. 100 wolves could die trying to kill one Shadow Brother. Worse, if they fail, the Darkhounds can eat the souls of those that aren't quite dead yet. And in a year or so, there'd be a new pack of Shadow Brothers that didn't remember ever being wolves. I hope they don't remember anyway.
Bravo on the voice. I liked it.
Oh, thank you.
Definitely Seth's patented Elias voice.
Yeah,
I remember
you like
that
that
from
one?
the video.
It's funny how you get a voice in your head and you can, pull it back because that's what Elias sounds like in my head, Well, what was it?
It's when you did the quote from the book in the fan video that John L. Jen edited together. It's you do the run when you have to, rest when you
That's
can.
right. Yeah.
And it's that voice.
It also sounds like an homage to like low country accent to me. So
I mean, some of that always creeps in just the various places that I've lived, right? Like I can't do a deep voice without a little bit of Southern accent creeping in. I don't know if it's Texas. I don't know if it's Mississippi.
Oh, it definitely has to be Mississippi. It's whiskey and bourbon and
I spent most of my youth in the South, right? Like Virginia, Texas, Mississippi, a little bit of Pennsylvania, but Pennsylvania, which is basically also nearly the South.
right.
It's still in the Shenandoah Valley, which is essentially the South. So yeah, no, it's amazing. But yet my parents, they're West Coasters. I've lived most of my adult life West Coast or in Philly, which who knows, that's just East Coast generic. So I don't know. My accent is, I always say the Texas Canadian accent. How y'all doing, eh?
hey.
Hey?
I love it. I love the information that's given here, and I love the way Elias, personalizes it and like makes it just like, again, almost like the same thing. He gives a lot of humanity to the wolves. He reminds us, which is ironic, I think, that you're reminded of the wolves' humanity.
Wolfanity.
And I also love,
Wolfanity, not humanity.
Wolfanity, yes. Or caninity.
Caninity, yeah.
Caninity, yes.
Yeah, and even I love the one little drop that he leaves where he says that we don't know if the wolves were going to fight because the Darkhounds were there or if the Darkhounds were created because they knew the wolves were going to fight. I love the idea of the wolves being so, universally, collectively, on the side of light that the Dark One had to create something to combat them, because it's just how wolves are, naturally in this realm or this telling of the wheel. I just think that's so amazing to give that kind of identity to an entire species.
Because you only see two kinds of heroes of the Horn, human and wolf. Right? I mean, maybe horse. You could argue that there's... I was reading the description of the horse that Noel rides out after the horn is blown in the last battle. And it's definitely not Bella, but it's like the most noble, the most beautiful creature I've ever seen. I'm like totally the spirit of Bella. What she would look like if she was a hero of the Horn, right? Like,
because they all ride horses. Clearly,
right.
Horses are capable of being heroes. Like, that's just a thing. But it makes sense that it would be two animals that humans have like prehistoric levels of contact with. That those would be the ones that have been elevated to being able to achieve that kind of relationship.
Yes. And in such integral ways, humankind, has interconnected relationships with horse and dog in a way as tools and resources that they don't have. They're not just utilized, which it made me think when you were talking. And again, this goes back to, my childhood in the 80s when every girl loved horses. What if you had Wolf Brothers and he'd also written Horse Sisters or Horse Sisters or whatever.
Horse
and it was a talent just for girls and or females, I should say, in the Wheel of Time. And so you have these women that talk to horses, these men that talk to wolves, and then you get like the horses come back. And that's also the Legend of Centaurs. Like Robert Jordan could have taken this to a whole level.
It would have been cool if he'd given us centaur.
It would have been cool.
And if horse girls as horse sisters. I mean, I wouldn't even have been too mad about the gender binaryism of that because he's already built that in. Just give girls their own species. Instead of saying, oh, wolf sisters could exist, just make horse sisters a thing in the here and now.
Yes.
This is reminding me of how in Wheel Takes, Allie often comes up with theories that are better than what RJ did. Like this is reminding me of that. Same with What in Color. Kiba is like 4 chapters into book 1 and predicting that Nynaeve has a block and she's going to need to break it in this, that, and the other way. And like, it's just like, I wish Robert Jordan could have met the creativity of what comes out of his books before he wrote the books, because they would have been better. We're crowdsourcing a better set of twists every day on these podcasts that we in the community are making. I swear.
I completely agree. And in a way that fan fiction doesn't give it justice, but also, and again, I'm very defensive, I guess. Maybe defensive isn't too strong of a word, but I'm very protective, I guess, of Robert Jordan, because yes, there are some problematic stuff that he continued in his writing, but at the time when it came out and the world that we were living in, there were a lot of Jordan stuff that were incredibly innovative and, God, I hate them saying this, but woke for the time, that we have now grown past. And I think that we need to, make sure that we give credit. It's one of the reasons why, even like when a lot of people complained about the stuff on the show, and how I was like, no, I think Rafe's actually doing the right thing by, extrapolating on like, Sawan and Moraine's relationship or whatever, because I think Robert Jordan in this day and age would have done that himself in his writing. If he was writing now, because it's more accepted, it's more known, we know more about, having a same-sex relationship is more mainstream. I think he would have incorporated that in a different way from what it was. I think we have a lot of recency bias sometimes, and we forget exactly how closeted and homophobic the 90s were, despite being so much better than, the 80s or the 70s.
Yeah, I don't. Mm-hmm. I just realized I've got a better animal than horse or wolf, and it would actually make sense with the world of dreams. It really shouldn't be the wolf dream, it should be the sheep dream, and you should have sheep brothers and sisters, because how else do you fall asleep? You count sheep. And that's the most domesticated animal, right? Like that sheep have been around
and the oldest
forever.
Domesticated animal,
right?
Yeah.
Yep, the oldest domesticated animal. If you're talking about like really how people connect with nature and how that they bring together, you really should have sheep siblings.
I love it.
And it could be still in the Two Rivers, because it's this last little place in the woods where they have sheeps that are special because they have 4 toes or whatever.
Why do you think Rand was a good dreamer, right? He was a shepherd.
He's a woolhead.
Well, yeah.
Woolhead isn't a pejorative. It's actually like
a dreamer.
Yeah, exactly. They call it stuffing your head with wool to walk in the dream world.
And he totally could have incorporated the Mary Had a Little Lamb and Little Bo Peep myths into that as well. They could have been started part of the story.
Little Randolph Thor Peep.
Anyway, obviously, domesticated animals aren't in. They'd have to be wild animals, which is weird that horses, I guess, aren't really in. Till I run Riyadh. Only hero horses, right? So these would just have to be hero sheep. Is basically what I'm saying. These are
heroic
someone
sheep.
Would have to heroic sheep. Okay. Yeah,
that totally. I think we can workshop that.
I mean, what's that claymation?
Oh, Wallace and Gromit, yes.
Wallace and Gromit with the sheep.
Yes. Oh my god.
As soon as you said it,
Shaun the
exactly
sheep.
what
Shaun
I
the
thought.
sheep. That's right.
Shaun the sheep. Yeah.
I fucking love Wallace and Gromit so much. God, my mom loved watching this when I was a little kid. Like, oh god, they're so good. It's the wrong trousers, Gromit.
Okay, drinking game from now on. Whenever you have Daniel as a stand-in for the Two Rivers men, Daniel and the Two Rivers men, you have to take a shot. Because from now on in the rest of the series, Daniel and he basically is under Tam, under Perrin. And that's maybe Abel's in there too. But basically, the rest of the Two Rivers men become Daniel and the Two Rivers men.
Someone should make that band.
That's actually a good band. I like that.
Yeah, Daniel and the Two Rivers band. It's a barbershop band, specifically.
I was just reading Origins, and the author, I'm so sorry, I'm blanking on his name.
Michael Livingston.
He was talking about how that... Yes, thank you. He was talking about how that he was trying to explain to Harriet why Daniel was the fourth member, and he even said, I don't have something for him yet. You're going to see it in the future. And I wonder if this was what he was originally seeing Daniel doing way back from the beginning. Is that the foreshadowing he was trying to convince Harriet to buy into?
Possibly. I have no idea what Daniel was supposed to do, but it's clear that he I think Robert Jordan had a buddy named Dan that he wanted to give some credit to, because Daniel just keeps getting shoehorned in there no matter what.
It's just a bannerman. Danelman?
I'm going to go on a limb here, and I'm going to break everyone's mind. This is true galaxy brain. Daniel was actually his lieutenant in Vietnam, and Robert Jordan served with Forrest Gump under Lieutenant Dan. And that's where Daniel comes from.
Lieutenant Dan ain't got no legs.
Oh, boy.
Oh, man.
Headcanon. It's headcanon accepted. It's fine.
Oh, yeah. And it's a blending of worlds. Now Forrest Gump is part of the Wheel of Time world.
Everything is connected.
Everything's connected. It's all a wheel. So they decide to take a look at the camp. So they make a gateway to a ridge over the hill from the Shido camp in Malden.
They think a lot about not making the sun glisten off of armor or off of looking glasses. And it's so slow.
It is slow because
it's very slow.
It sort of foreshadows when they use the gateways as just looking through them in the air in the last battle. But I would have liked it better if this had then evolved into that, as opposed to someone just being like, "Oh, what can't we do it sideways?" But the whole scouting through a gateway, I think, is they don't know how to use it just by looking through it, right? They still have to
hold it open for hours.
We'll make a gateway, hold it open for hours, pass through it, pass the whole army through it. Perrin has never really figured out the best way to use gateways. They're a new technology, and yes, they're an advantage, but they're not the advantage they could be if he understood how to use them.
Yeah, we get it here that it's so tiring for him to do this. It's so difficult for him to manage his stuff. But also, Grady's gateways are bigger, so I guess forcing him to do this is strengthening his muscles. So that's good. Perrin's essentially forcing him to become a stronger channeler.
Men's strength grows in fits and spurts, and Grady's has spurted. Grady's power spurted all over the place. Yep.
Yeah, that happens during puberty sometimes.
Right.
And in a lot of ways, that is what these channelers are experiencing. They're channeling puberty, right? They're going through this, you may experience a few changes. You don't know how tall you're going to end up being because, again, I think channeling in the one power, he's made very explicitly equivalent to how tall you are, especially in men, right? This whole Demandred is not as tall as Louis Theron and not as powerful as him. That's what pisses him off. Is those two there's very much height is power and that's why Rand's so tall. He's the tallest because he's also the most powerful.
Well, and let's also make sure we're very clear too. The whole what you were just talking about being obsession with tall has to also play some sort of phallic thing too. Basically, he's putting a dick measuring contest out in the open where everyone can be seen by everyone.
Mine's bigger than yours, right? Yeah, totally.
Yes.
Right. We've talked about that, the one power, especially in the women, how it's they literally are doing that as a dick measuring contest.
Boob measuring contest.
Boob measuring contest, right? Because that's the physical manifestation of your power.
Mm-hmm. Everyone knows. We get some Galien and Elias snipping at each other. That's fun. We've got Annoura and Berylane snipping at each other. It's just everyone's being grouchy, turning the page. Galien and Arganda do this whole macho man thing where they're hiking up the hill and trying to not let the other see that they're getting winded, even though they're both middle-aged men who ride everywhere and don't have a lot of cardio. They're both doing the thing where they're pretending that they're not tired. It's
no problem talking through this.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're knuckling their side at the same time because they got a stitch.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I don't know, do you guys, I constantly in my head have just combined those two together, in my retellings or whatever.
Oh yeah, it's Ramonda and Lelaine all over again. Over again.
Totally.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yes. It is totally just, okay. One's with one queen and with
they're the leaders of the armies from Yeah, from two different queens, but they're both queens sworn to Perrin, so the armies both work for Perrin. So they both work for Perrin directly, and they're both trying to get their queens back.
And in my mind, they look alike.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Totally.
One's got like a gold themed armor, the other's got a blue themed armor. That's it. Yeah. It's I don't have a ship name for them. Like we've got Romaine for Ramonda and Lelaine. I don't know how you put Galien and Arganda together, but yeah, I totally agree. They are one.
Gaga.
Galliganda. Yeah.
Galliganda. So yeah, Galliganda is being.
Now that's a band name. That's a good
yeah,
band name.
totally. So yeah, they get to the top of the hill. They meet up with some maidens. They get, brought up to speed.
And Elias recognizes them.
Yeah, and it's like the Aiel show up and everyone wants to attack, but then of course the Wolf Brothers can spell who they are, and it's ha ha ha, Wolf Brothers are sneaky.
Right, it's like, wait, how did you know who we are? And they go, well, you're wearing different cloaks, and they look and they're wearing like the identical uniform, and it's like, how? No, that's bullshit. And he's like, yeah, we can smell you. More Wolf Brother stuff.
Yeah, so yeah, they just describe the fact that the Shadow aren't going anywhere, that there's reconnaissance teams out looking around. We look around the valley, we see the aqueduct. It's a big, long panning shot with a voiceover explanatory text.
I mean, the aqueduct is pretty important. That is foreshadowing to how he's going to figure out, that's sort of what he needed to look at, is he needed to see the aqueduct, because no amount of scouting would have pointed that out, and he wouldn't have been able to figure out the use of the fork root T without looking at the aqueduct.
Yes, he has to see the size of the town, realize the impossibility of the needle in the haystack he's going for, and then see the aqueduct and have that little clue kind of just go into his brain to come up later.
This is where we find out there's 400 channelers, not just the 100 or 50 or so that they were thinking.
Yeah, which again to me is just overwhelming. If I knew there was a, army of that size and they had, 400 something channelers, like that makes your knees quake. Because Perrin doesn't have anywhere near that amount. 400 channelers is a lot. That's a lot of power.
Yeah. Yeah, he's got a handful where he's got double digits. This is triple digits.
Right. And he's got small double digits.
Yeah, and the army size of the regular fighters is similarly mismatched, right? Like this is a decent sized town that is swallowed by an encampment that is just wrapping around the town for miles, essentially. It's a lot. He has to completely rethink his strategy. And I think the strategy he goes with of like, well, if I can't free one prisoner, I'll free all the prisoners. Like that works for sure, but it takes the aqueduct. Yeah.
And that's very much a heroic trope in and of itself. One thing I do again applaud Jordan for is he took 3 different heroes, and we're getting one story with 3 different heroes when any of those, especially at the time when Jordan was being written, fantasy was much more about you follow one character or one group of people. And this you literally have is such, again, we are blessed to be able to experience this because it's such a breadth of character across the board that you get to have 3 individual heroes that all could be their own story in and of themselves.
And really, he expanded that to 4 or 5 with Egwene and Nynaeve. That basically almost Egwene certainly gets her own storyline. Elaine gets her own storyline. Aviendha gets a little bit of a storyline.
I'd say Nynaeve gets a storyline.
Yeah, but her storyline's always with somebody else. She's always either with Egwene or with Rand or with Elaine. Like, she's never off on her own doing her own thing. Until
she goes to the Borderlands and rallies Malkier.
Gives the best speech of the entire book.
Right.
It's still for land, though.
And it's also, she's with Rand, and she goes up there. She makes a side trip. It's, a side quest to get land going. And then
for one day, she was on her own.
Same thing like when she goes off and gets bale-fired in the boat, right? She's off on her own for a little while, right? But she's with Elaine and Egwene in that storyline.
Yeah. But in this storyline, the cleansing is going to start, and Perrin is going to be forced to see the vision of Rand that he's been pushing back this whole time, just all at once. It's a very cool description.
I love this. And I remember too, and again, Seth, because you were reading the same time I was, I believe, when I read this after waiting all these years after the cleansing, and I remember being like, oh my God, this is happening at the exact same time. And it made these books a lot more interesting and a lot less, It's like I began to have not an appreciation for the slog, but I was like, okay, these books are doing something that's kind of cool.
Yeah, on one hand, yes, but at the same time, I wanted to see people react to the cleansing having happened. I didn't want them to see the cleansing happening. And I was very frustrated. I was like, let's get past the end of because I was even at the end of the last book, I'd been frustrated because I was like, let's make some forward progress till the last battle. Like, are we ever going to see an ending to this series? Because it feels like he's just procrastinating. And then to get this book and be like, oh my God, not only are we not moving forward in time, we're actually flashing back. Right? This whole Perrin 4 chapters ends with the cleansing beginning, which was the ending of the last book. So it's a flashback inside of it's a double flashback. It's so far behind where I wanted to be when this book came out.
Okay, I completely understand, and I definitely can see that looking back. To me, this proved my headcanon at the time, which was that the cleansing was actually the beginning of the last battle, and that we were going to wind up finding out that we were actually wrapping up the story in the next book or two because that. So it was. I guess it kind of helps my headcanon of that was the last battle was the start of the cleansing was the start of the last battle is always was my headcanon.
I mean, in a lot of ways, you could say that it was because, again, the timelines are so tight that, and the attack on Camelin really starts very shortly after the cleansing, which, essentially, you could say that with the cleansing, Rand started the last battle, and it took the Dark One, a couple of weeks to get their forces together to counterattack. But that's about how long the last battle occurs after the cleansing. It's not very long.
Wow.
It's not very long at all.
The opening salvo of the battle, one might say.
Because essentially all we have is the second half of Crossroads of Twilight and Knife of Dreams. And then the last battle is essentially starting with the attack on Camelin. And so we essentially have one book in between the cleansing.
This is actually interesting too, because I wonder if readers that find the book now or whatever, because they have all the books out, because for us, I think for me, let me say that, let me not speak for someone else. For me, it was always hard to adjust the timeline, because you're waiting years in between books. So you kind of assume that as well. Plus the world moved a lot slower when we weren't all connected as much as we are now. For me, it's like one of the things that this podcast has also shown me is how quick that timeline is, and how young they still are. Because I guess I assumed they had kind of aged with me, right. But they actually didn't, because not that much time had passed.
No, they don't at all. Yeah. They mature very quickly, but they don't age very much.
Yeah, no. For sure. So yeah, Perrin comes back to himself to his companions freaking out and being like, no, everything's ruined. And he's like, I just had a vision. It's Rand. Chill. Everyone's like, what? Yeah. He's like, I'm Taviran. Chill.
Well, and also I love that, because again, putting yourself in the position of being, let's say you're the average channeler, hanging around, and all of a sudden you feel more power than you have ever felt in your life. You can point exactly where it is. You're already experiencing all kinds of shit you never thought you'd deal with in your entire life. So of course you're going to freak out no matter what. Great. And he's like, it's Rand. And they're like, wait, that doesn't really help us, because right. Rand's also the dragon. Of course it's Rand. Is this the last battle, Perrin? What's happening?
Right. Is this the beginning of a new breaking? Yeah.
And I like Perrin, his business. He'll take care of it, whatever it is. Anyway, moving on. I need prisoners, Sulin. And everyone's like, whoa, hold on. No, moving on.
Yeah, back up, dude. Yeah.
And he's got male channelers and female channelers saying that's a lot of power.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I totally get Annoura. She's like, we need to go witness this. Whatever's happening, we need to know what it is. We need to witness it right now. I totally get where she's coming from.
So, Dark Friend or not, Annoura has always been one of my favorite Aes Sedai. I always want more from her. I love the way, they get Morgan defines everyone down into different levels of categories. I know she's a low level character, but I love her approach. I think she's just a great deliverer of information, and I would love to have seen more of her. Deliver information for the reader.
Yeah. Would have been fun to get into her head a bit.
Yeah, I would have loved to know a little bit more about what her plans were and everything. One Annoura POV would have made me happy. Because I feel like she's just major enough to get like one POV to be like, okay, let's see Perrin from her. Like in all 4 of these chapters, it's all from Perrin's POV. Let's get out of Perrin's head and see him from Anora's POV.
Yeah.
Yes. Or even some Bear Lane. I mean, I think this whole slog would have been better if he would have done more chapters with different characters. I completely agree with you,
Same
Seth.
plot, same scene, different POV.
Yeah, different POV.
Because let's be honest, nothing happens anyway, so you might as well look at it from his point of view.
Right.
Yeah, totally.
And let's see what those characters are thinking and what they think about the other characters. And he even doesn't really use Perrin's smell very much. Like, Perrin's not smelling any of these characters. He's not mentioning how they smell. He's not mentioning their emotions. It really feels like he kind of forgot how to write these chapters well. And like he's following a bad formula.
What I think happened is I think he realized that his characters had developed to a point more than the story, and he had to catch his story up. He's like, look, we've got all this going on, and we've got to get the last battle somehow. And there's all this stuff that he knew had to happen, because that's really what, as much as we love the characters and the development and the world building, the whole point of the story for him was the last battle. So that's where he's building everything towards. So I feel like that's what he was trying to do, was to catch the story up with how deep his characters had gone. But by that time, we'd all fallen in love with it.
But he's not being very efficient with his storytelling, right? Like, he's not being efficient at all.
No, he's not. And that's why I said the narrative debt that he owed was to lose one of his main characters. I feel like he owed it because he tried. Applaud. Yes, thank you for trying, RJ, but you didn't succeed. And your penalty is you have to kill off one of your characters. So.
Yeah.
What I did notice, especially here, is we're setting up the chopping off of the hand, right? He wants a prisoner, and Sulan's like, you're not going to get any information out of him. And he's like, oh, you want to bet? And that you want to bet is, I think, to like directly leads to him cutting off the hand of one of the prisoners, right? That he really is desperate, right? So we're starting down that path to, him throwing away the axe, which is an important moment for the last battle.
All right, so with that, are we done with this book and ready to switch gears over to the cleansing?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's time to have dessert, because I don't think there's anything left in that chapter. Yeah. We've eaten our meat, and now we can have our pudding.
Yes. So this is the real reason why I've been so excited coming on, because it's absolutely my favorite part of the whole story. Uh-huh. And when you first talked about how that you may readjust the chapter, I immediately got on Discord and sent Radia a text and said, I want to be a part of this at whatever way I can be, because I love the cleansing. And I think the way you're breaking it out is just sheer genius.
Thank you.
So good job, Aradia. Good job, Seth.
Well, I'm glad I could produce this to order.
Because we can match this up and be like, oh, this is Perrin's just sensing, and the people around Perrin are sensing the battle. And this is Rand in the first moments of channeling, maybe seconds later. Right? Like,
no, I think we're an hour in or more.
You think we're an hour in?
Point, because Rand could not see Nynaeve any longer. I feel like the sweat is starting to soak through the shirt. I feel like we're in the mid plateau of the experience at this point, but we're still flashing forward from Perrin's POV. That's how I've always read this.
Right. We're definitely okay. Fair enough, but not very far is what I'm saying.
Sure.
Right, because I feel like it's almost like Perrin's POV is reminding us the scene you guys just did, where they start, and then what we're about to do in Winter's Heart is naturally what comes after Perrin's vision.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So you somehow, we're actually almost in chronological order. Those chapters happen first. Rand sits down, does the thing you talked about last week, and now we're ready for him to do the next thing. So
yeah.
It's amazing how well it works to just smear the 20 POVs across the 20 chapters, right? Like, we just matched them up 1-to-1. We're not doing anything fancy, but, just the way the writing works. Both of them, time is moving forward, and they both kind of start at the same moment, right? And so those first 20 chapters are occurring over the course of these 20 POVs, which are both occurring basically chronologically.
Yeah. But he's right now in the grind of the taint is moving, but he has no idea how long the time has gone by. So we have hours left to go in the process.
Many hours,
for
yes.
Sure.
Rand could not see Nynaeve any longer. He could not see anything, feel anything. He swam in surging seas of flame, scrambled across collapsing mountains of ice. The taint flowed like an ocean tide, trying to sweep him away. If he lost control for an instant, it would strip away everything that was him and carry that down the conduit too. As bad, or maybe worse, despite the tide of filth flooding through that odd flower, the taint on the male half of the source seemed no less. It was like oil floating on water in a coating so thin you could not notice till you touched the surface. Yet coating the vastness of the male half, it was an ocean in itself. He had to hold on. He had to. But for how long? How long could he hold on?
Several hours, apparently.
I love that.
The thing that I really want to talk about here is competing infinities or different levels of infinities, right? Because the taint on one level is infinite, but it's infinite on a two-dimensional plane, right? It's very thin, but infinitely wide. The true power, the one power, the true source.
One power, yeah.
The one power, the true source, sorry.
Robert Jordan.
Yeah, damn you. At least it's not the Stru or whatever. It doesn't start with an S.
Yes.
So, but
Saidin and Saidar.
the one power, Saidin and Saidar. Oh my god, it does start with an S. That rat bastard. Fuck
That was
him.
great. Great timing. Great timing.
So
Anyway.
Saidin and Saidar are both infinite in two dimensions in terms of a plane, but also infinitely deep. And so you have this, infinity that's a much larger infinity than the one that is the Dark One's power. And that's how you're able to sort of drain it off, right? Because think of it like a Taylor series, right? For those of you who are in math, right? You can either have one that converges or one that diverges. And so you can have an infinite series of numbers adding up, but they converge to a finite number. And that's a series that converges, right? And so I think in a lot of ways, the taint on the Dark One's on the one power converges. It might be infinitely big, but it is a finite amount of taint, versus the one power, which is divergent.
I'm sorry, I'm a junior high child. The Dark One's taint being so wide and not very deep. I mean, I'm sorry, it's just all it's total locker room humor.
No, it's fine.
Great job, Seth. You brought such a gravitas to the Dark One's taint.
Whenever I can really get serious about the Dark One's taint and focus in on the center of the issue, I like to really, give it the old stink eye and try and break it down in a way that I think everybody can enjoy. Because I know for some people it's a sensitive topic. So you want to approach it with a lot of delicacy and lube.
I am deceased. I was not expecting that. Done. Totally done. Great. Okay, so competing infinities.
Yeah, no, I think I'm done. That was all I had to say about that. Is just I think there's a lot of fun in metaphysics in Robert Jordan's description of the cleansing of the one power.
I really like that because I've always found the contradiction of two competing infinities to be quite annoying, but to see it as a two-dimensional versus three-dimensional infinity kind of helps me wrap my head around the apparent contradiction.
Mm-hmm. That you can cleanse all of Saidin without channeling all of Saidin.
Right. This makes it make sense, and I appreciate that because it's a weird.
I still love that it was such a genius way of approaching the taint and trying to give some physical, principles to it. And again, it's one thing I really love about Robert Jordan's writing and his magic system is how he does try to give it very solid, clear rules and tries not to break them. So, and I like that with the taint, he's using it like a siphon and kind of using it like you guys described in the previous, conversations about how it actually functions. And that Rand at this point, I think, is so full of the power. All he is feeling and seeing, he doesn't even know if he's actually doing a good job. It's just like he's in the middle of it and he has to continue. And it's like, it's too big to let go. It's too big to, it's too big to fail. You got to just ride it out at this point for good or bad, and he also is, trying to stay aware because channeling that much of the one power must be, like a drug, it's such a high, and he's also trying to stay aware, make sure he's being effective and make sure he doesn't die. And I love that it's just in this middle of this thing where it's like, and it's Demandred. I always say his name wrong. Demandred, who notices the darkness is growing. I think even before we see it from Rand's point of view, right?
Yeah, totally.
So speaking of Demandred,
Ch7&8 rides up.
Yeah,
Ch7&8.
Yeah.
Well, what is he doing right now? We don't get a POV from Matt and the band.
It's true.
Right?
It's true.
Vannon very much could slip away easily and be taking place in this scene, right? Like,
well, he does gateways.
Yeah.
And we've never seen Demandred and Ch7&8 together.
It's true. It's true. He shows up in the city. He drops into the city, right?
Yeah, he shows up in the city, which I always took to meant like right there at the gates as opposed to the hills surrounding it. But I didn't take it. I never took it as he was literally in the city because I thought Arid Hall would be completely off limits even now. But
oh no, he definitely, one look at the rubble-strewn street changed his mind about altering anything, though. Beside him rose a half-pale dome, its shattered top 200 feet or more above the street. He's in the city, next to rubble. There's a dome, one of those dome buildings right above him. He gateways right into the center of Shadar Logoth.
But then fire erupts in the forest and comes marching at him. So I was with Chad thinking it seems like he's at the gate rather than in the middle. It's very confusing.
Sure. I will give you at the gate of Shadar Logoth, but still inside the gate of Shadar Logoth. Sure. And though the fire starts in the forest, it's coming at him.
Because it's not like Ruidian levels of off limits. It's just maybe really strategically difficult to make sure you don't slice a building down on top of your head or something.
And also, don't go in at night, right? It's still daytime. This is still, they started at dawn. We're an hour or so in.
But yeah, he shows up and then immediately has to bounce to another location, which is actually in the forest. He shows up in the city, looks around, and then the fire starts to come for him. So he has to gateway out and does end up in the forest running around there for his most of his arc. Which actually he runs right into the source of the fire and everything else that he's doing without meaning to. Well, I think that Cadsuane throws the first fire at him because at the end of her POV, she points towards the ruins of Shadar Logoth. So I think that she's pointing at him landing. Oh, okay. Yes, that would make sense. Right. She's not the one using Kalendor, but it's Narishma, right? She's pointing where the fire needs to go. Yes. It is actually Narishma doing the fire. That's true. But yeah, so as he's either in the gates or whatever, from the broken rim of the ruin down to the street, though, the air was dark with shadows as if the night were already falling. The city quivered. He could feel it through his boots. So I assume that's the beginning of the taint forming that dark sphere that we see later. Yeah. Yeah, it hasn't really crested the skyline of the city yet, but if you're in the city, you can see it starting to fill up the streets and the alleys. Isn't that also, and again, you got the scientists, but isn't there some sort of physical principle that when you pour something out, it takes a while for it to actually form into obviously liquid takes the shape of its container, but isn't there something about when you form, eventually everything becomes a circle or a dome, but when it first starts, it doesn't need that natural structure yet. Am I making something up? I may be talking way out of my ass. I am not a scientist. I'm an elementary school teacher, but I thought I remember something about when you a viscous liquid, viscous substances that they will not take a form, but if you keep adding enough, they will form a circle or a dome or a sphere or something.
I don't know. Maybe I'd literally maybe making that up, but I think you guys would know.
I mean, I feel like surface tension naturally brings liquids together into a sphere, especially in a lack of gravity, right? If it's not falling, if you look in space, like you see the astronauts have liquid on the space shuttle and they're just perfect spheres, right? That's just sitting there. So, if there's no reason for this, I kind of assume the dome is surrounding Ch7&8 and growing kind of like an egg inside of it. Like it's like this little ball that gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and engulfs more and more of the city. And it's sort of like, go ahead.
I always figured it was kind of like a mist that like rose up from the ground, Mashadar-like, and then once it got like above at least the first story, it started to like come together and like, I don't know, kind of be a very slowly growing like a mushroom fruiting body kind of thing, like coming out of the city, I guess. But I don't know what the physics of evil fog are.
I mean,
I imagine it as a slow motion explosion, right? So it's a sphere,
like a mushroom cloud.
No, almost more like a shockwave.
Okay.
Moving slowly, right? That's half in the ground, right? So it starts, if you think of Ch7&8 having a gravitational center, that's where all the taint is being channeled into, right? And so as that has taint channeling into it, it swells bigger and bigger and bigger, and you get this black sphere that you see described. Everyone describes it as a dome because it's half underground, right? But it's a sphere.
And we know that because the crater afterward goes deep into the ground, yeah.
Because the crater afterwards is the bottom, right, of the sphere. So we know it's a sphere. And it's a small, and I imagine it starting as a small sphere in the center of the city that gets bigger and bigger over time. And we see it like bubbling up and boiling at various points and it's swelling, getting bigger. And basically that's the gravity of the evil of Ch7&8 is attracting the gravity of the taint. And once he opens that conduit, have you seen those ones where they take a chain in a cup and they fling it over the edge and the gravity causes it to fall out?
Yes. That's what I was trying to say.
So there's a point, yeah. So there's this physics trick where you can do, if you take a chain and you have it in a cup and you hold it up, if you get enough of it coming out of the cup, the weight of the chain will force more to come out and follow it. And I think that's what Rand is doing, is he has to pump enough Sidene through the cup that is Sidar, right? If chain is Sidene and the cup Sidar, he has to get enough weight going that it starts pulling itself, and the gravity is the evil of Ch7&8. And then all of a sudden, the evil of Ch7&8 pulls on that chain, and I guess the chain really is tainted Sidene, and it pulls on that taint, and the taint is separated. Sidene just keeps cycling because it's, an infinite cycle, but the chain of taint gets pulled off the top of it and onto Ch7&8. And I think one of the reasons it's so scary is what if there's enough taint, that black ball could keep growing and growing and growing and growing, and what if it gets bigger than the Earth? Then what's left?
Right. And because that was actually Rand's concern. And it's funny because you guys were talking about, I kind of had a blending, I guess, of both of you, except I always thought of the taint, and I probably took it way too literal, as being oily or being viscous. And so to me, it was almost like syrup. And so I kind of imagined it kind of piling up and pressing down and then slowly overflowing. And the mass of it created its own self-sustaining shape, the sphere kind of going on. That's how I always kind of saw it. But I love the point you just made, though. I think that was really, really good.
I'm curious what you guys think about Demandred's choice to switch. When he sees this black ball, he decides to not mess with what Rand is doing. And I was wondering what you guys thought about him showing up, intending to disrupt the process, seeing the ball, and then deciding, nah, this is fine. What's he thinking?
I'm thinking he thinks he has to go create a storyline of the bow, and he jumps off the Shara. He's like, oh shit, I gotta have my own prophecies.
I assumed he was already doing that at this point.
Obviously just playing, but I think, to me, I think it was all about, again, the selfish nature of evil is one of the underlying tropes of Jordan's writing. And to me, this was such a big unknown to him that he had to, he's like, I'm going to remove myself from the situation and see what's going to happen. Because I think he also could have had the same thoughts Rand did. How big is this going to get? Where does this end? What's going to happen? And I think it was a decision to preserve and be there to fight in the next battle, is what I kind of always took it as.
So I don't read it the same way necessarily as Demandred retreating from the battle and deciding to leave it alone, right? Because he says here he's retreating. Sooner or later, the old man would get tired, and then he could take care of killing Althor. He's just involved in a fight, right? Because he gets in a fight with Dahmer Flynn, right? And so he's just sort of retreating a little bit temporarily to let Dahmer Flynn wear himself out, and then he thinks he can defeat Dahmer Flynn and go in and take out Rand. Right? He's not giving up the fight entirely.
Okay.
He's not retreating entirely. He's just I'm in this guy is way more powerful than I expected because he's in a circle and he probably has some Angreal. And Demandred's just there. He hasn't gotten his Saw Angreal yet. He's, and in a lot of ways, the Demandred that we get here is not the Demandred that Sanderson writes.
Correct. Which I think is a superior Demandred.
Which one?
The one Sanderson writes.
Well, that's one that's evolved. That's one that's changed. It's one who's fallen back in love. In a lot of ways, he's become less of a Forsaken and more of a human. He's given up some of his inhumane quest for power.
Well, that's yeah. Okay, so then the pause was really just about the fight with Flynn and the circle. It wasn't about him recognizing that what's going on and removing himself from the entire situation.
That was my thought.
Because he wants to kill Rand either way, but at the very beginning, he's like, well, if he can undo what Rand has done at the source, then he might be able to kill him that way. And then he looks at the dome and says, never mind, but I still want to kill him. And I don't understand why looking at the dome makes him change his priorities.
Where does he say never mind? I guess I'm not seeing that part.
The second paragraph. One look at the rubble-strewn street changed his mind about altering anything. He doesn't change his plans to kill Rand. He just changes his plans about undoing what Althor had done at the source.
Right, because he thought at first he could use this to his advantage in taking out Althor, right?
Yeah, and then he changes his mind about that, and I'm just like, why? Because he still wants to kill Rand. He's just like, clearly this process isn't worth monkey wrenching. It's just that first paragraph. It's just very confusing.
I think it's the way he's responding, the way the air is dark with shadows, the city quivered. He's like, oh crap, I can't undo this.
Oh, okay. Okay. It's just a simple matter of, this is bigger than I thought.
Too much of the chain is already out of the cup.
Okay. All right, cool.
Okay. I like that.
But he still is very determined. He's going to kill Rand. He's going to break the damn cup, even if the chain is out of here. He can still break... Well, the cup holder, I guess, is actually who he's going for in this analogy.
Right.
And yeah, he basically gets stuck in a holding pattern with Flynn's circle for the duration of the battle, I think. They just kind of spar the whole time.
Right, because they're using... Cadsuane's using her Terangriel to figure out where he is, and they're channeling him and following him, correct?
Right.
Or is that his opinion of what's happening?
Well, he's now met up with people in the woods. So Cadsuane is in the center, right? And she pointed it like, hey, someone's out there. And so now he's running around, and now he's run into like an outer ring of defenders. And now they're battling like line of sight with him.
Gotcha.
So, presumably Cadsuane's leaving them alone.
And this is the only POV we get from him. We don't see him again from his POV.
Yeah, so he gets stuck here. This team of 3 does their job so well that they keep Demandred tied up.
And who is this team of 3?
Dahmer Flynn and whoever he circled with.
Yeah,
earlier.
I forget who that is, but it's Two Eyes to Die. Somewhere back.
I remember reading this when I read this in real time, but like I love the fact that it gives the perspective that he's just walking through and he's like, who are these random people in the woods? And I feel like that's something that is continuously about the cleansing that makes it so interesting is like he literally did not. Was he literally like wondering who these random people are. He didn't think they were there because of Althor. Like, he didn't even expect them to be any sort of even, sentries or, guards or something, much less people who actually could attack him. He's like, who are these random people wandering in the woods outside of this abandoned city? And what are they doing here during this, catastrophic event? And it just made it very interesting to me to how the Aes Sedai and even Ashaman are seen, like, despite their own opinion of themselves with the power in their world, from his point of view, they're still like peasants,
Yeah. And the two Aes Sedai that Flynn is with is Serene and Corell. Those are the two Aes Sedai that are with him.
Okay.
I found that in Cat Swain's POV.
Yeah, and they, let's see, they do drive him off, so they talk about that later.
Yeah. Abruptly, the old man stopped, thrusting one of his hands straight toward Demandred, and Demandred found himself frenetically fending off a net of sardine that struck his warding much harder than it should have, as hard as his own spinning wood. So, like, I love that realization of what exactly the power he's literally encountering. And he's like, okay, for the first, like, he's actually finding these three people, these random people are also a rival to him when it comes to level of power, because he's like, he was not expecting that level of power to bounce off his own sardine netting.
Right. It's like, these peasants know how to throw a thesaurus at me. What?
Right. And then they're basically, what does Sherman do to the south, where you just burn everything and kill it?
Yeah, I mean, this is March to the Sea.
Yeah, March to the Sea, but I forget there's a name for that style of warfare, and I forget the name of it. Basically,
Scorched Earth?
Scorched Earth, thank you. Yeah, Scorched Earth. And that's literally what they're doing. They're doing a Scorched Earth policy and just burning everything in an attempt to kill anyone that they can, because they're rightfully, or well, maybe not rightfully, luckily rightfully assuming that anyone that shows up is going to be someone who's going to try and stop Rand, which is actually probably a good thing Annoura didn't show up, because what if she would have showed up? Or, this is interesting, what if Seth, she actually is a dark friend, and her attempt to try and get them to go see what was going on was really her trying to fulfill her responsibility of being there. I don't like that because I like Annoura, but I'm just throwing shit against the wall.
It fits with the red herring. It fits with the idea that she's a very well constructed red herring. I also love Demandred being like, I'm so brilliant, I'm a great general, but generals aren't supposed to fight in the mud. This is so undignified.
Run away!
Like, tactical retreat to the rear.
Right. And that's why the Demandred we get in the last battle is different, because that Demandred fights. He is not worried about being a troop. He is absolutely a fighter. He's like, come on, challenge me. Let's go one-on-one. Like, I've got no problem. Like, yes, he's surrounded by his troops, but he also, is that one-on-one fighter. And I feel like he really is a different character. To me, he feels like a different character. And that's a shame, because I really wanted to find out what happened with this Demandred.
Yeah.
And I feel like we never really get a good resolution on him, because, he's Vannon.
Yeah. Basically. But with that, I think we have closed out our recording, our chapter for the day. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Chad, for coming back as a guest.
Especially thank you, Chad, for your great input. Really helped us get through these chapters.
This has been fun. This was less sloggy.
Hey, it's my pleasure. I love these books. I love being on here with you guys. And again, I was telling a radio, I've had a lot happen this year, and you guys, like, definitely, like, from the very beginning when I found you and Patrick back last January, and then all the changes, you guys have been there through everything, and it's been amazing and wonderful, and I'm grateful to just be able to talk to you guys in real time. So I love being here, and would love to come back anytime.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, we appreciate it.
True. But I just want to say, going back to our original tangent we had a little bit, I think that if Perrin had been the one, or had been one of the ones to have died, I think whatever his name is, the Shido that helped Fail, or the brotherless helped Fail, I think him,
Roland?
Yeah, him killing Perrin and then Fail having to deal with the guilt of that situation would be a much more interesting story than Perrin being the one dealing with the guilt of, I rescued Fael, but I killed this person or whatever else. And I think Perrin, like Hagrid, had outlived his usefulness by this book, and the author should have ended the story.
See, I just totally disagree. I think Perrin's one of the most underused characters. I think he has so much potential with the Wolf Dream, and the way that the Wolf Dream merges into the real world during the last battle, and his mastery over that, and leading the last battle, and the Darkhounds, and like the fact that Sanderson was like, oh, he's too tired to participate in the last battle. He's got to take a nap, just so he didn't have to write any of Perrin's scenes, drove me absolutely nuts this time through the last battle. Yeah.
Okay, I can see that. I can definitely see that. And I agree with you. I do think the last battle had to involve the Wolf Dream. So I guess for me, I was thinking if my headcanon is correct, and we end with the cleansing of Sidene being the real last battle, then Perrin getting killed by the Shido would make perfect sense. So sorry, Brandon. That was my headcanon, not your actual book.
So what you're saying is take all of the stuff that's in this book, put it before the cleansing, and have the cleansing be the last battle, and have everybody come at Rand and really have that be a much bigger battle.
Yes, that's kind of what I, and even it's really, because even at the time, I thought this is what was going to happen, was I thought that we would because I don't know but like, it seemed to me like when we were reading these books as they were being released, it was always like, well, how many more books is it? Because, Robert was always famous, or RJ, was always famous for saying, that he's going to finish this series up. He was always just about ready to finish the series up. I think even if he had to bring it in on a library cart, he was going to finish the book up or whatever. So to me, I think I was really expecting, we were going to find out that the cleansing was actually going to be the last battle, or the start of the last battle. And we were going to end it probably in the next book or so, was what I thought at the time. And looking back on it, I can't say that wouldn't have been a good plan. No offense to Sanderson, but that's just my personal opinion.
I could see it being certainly part of the last battle, that like, he realizes in order to actually cleanse the source, he has to imprison the Dark One again. And
that would have been amazing, Seth. Yeah, and that also would highlight the metaphysical aspect of it too. It would have taken it and added this whole metaphysical or spiritual, sensation as well.
Right. The taint on the source is the Dark One, right? And you can't get rid of it without also finishing the last battle. And you can do everything else that you did just a little bit earlier. I honestly, I do think that there's a moment where basically Jordan went, at some point when writing this book, oh crap, I have to bring all these characters back together. And I think Knife of Dreams is his redemption, right? That's the one you can say, we can be like, oh, well, he may have lost his way a little bit in these middle books, but then he came back and wrote Knife of Dreams, which is absolutely buttoning up a bunch of the plot lines and bringing a bunch of the characters back together in a way that was very obvious that what we were going to get was a coherent battle with all of these elements coming together. And the question is, how well is that going to be executed? And, we have Brandon Sanderson's execution, and we always, of course, would love to have Robert Jordan's.
And that actually, so what started this whole theory of conversation was when you guys were talking with Morgan about Brandon Sanderson's writing and things like that. And I started thinking about the differences. And that's where I really got hung up on the character development. And I think that RJ, I think he honestly, not only was he great at fantasy and is definitely the heir to Tolkien, but I think as a writer of American literature, his ability to develop characters and grow characters across a novel or across a story is some of the best in American literature. And I think that unfortunately, and again, I don't mean to offend Brandon or anyone that likes the writing the last 3 books, but that's not Brandon's strong point. And again, I do think it says something to the cultural and generational legacy and experience of the individual authors and how that affected their own writing. Why Brandon writes a little differently or a lot differently from RJ and how RJ is growing up in the South and his wearing the mantle of the great Southern storyteller that Brandon, doesn't relate to maybe. I think that impacted Brandon's ability to really finish the story in a way that was as satisfactory as we wanted to, because the character development is just so rich with RJ.
No, and he talks about how he was a, organic writer, right? He let the characters take them where they wanted to go. And I think maybe, and also based on things I've heard the people around him say, he was really killing himself to write the books up through Lord of Chaos. And after that point, he really stepped back the hours that he was putting in. And I think what we got is a very lightly edited version of Robert Jordan after Lord of Chaos. And so I think that what you're getting is something that maybe could have gone through another layer of editing, but they just, physically, and he just didn't have the ability to keep doing that. Because nobody can keep doing that and maintain that pace for as long as he was maintaining it. The quality is so high, and the editing and the foreshadowing and the way he was tying everything together. I think partially he just had to slow down the pace for his own sanity, and
I would agree with that.
His editor basically said, you need to slow down. You are killing yourself. And what ended up happening is, and they've said this again publicly, is these books were getting submitted to the editor weeks to days before they were going to the printer instead of months. And so, there was just a lot of last minute scramble to get these up. And I do think it affected the quality. I think that anyone who says that the quality of these books isn't different, it hasn't read them enough, right? Like you can say, I'm not going to say, I like them. I still love them. These characters,
yes.
But these are a very different style, quality, and
I feel like Sanderson's books.
Yeah. Same thing with Sanderson. Sanderson's books are a very different tempo and quality, and the Wheel of Time isn't complete without all, I want to say 4 chapters of the Wheel of Time, right? There's Era 1, which is like, book 1 through 3, Eye of the World through Dragon Reborn, which is Jordan writing a very typical fantasy novel. Then there's 4 through 6, which is what we think of as the golden era of Wheel of Time, right?
Oh, it's the best.
It's the best, right? Although I will admit, I think 6 drags a little bit in the middle, and I think 3 might be the better book.
Ooh, okay, interesting. I think 4 is the best period, so you're not going to convince me of anything else. So
I as well. And then you've got sort of 7. You can debate whether 7 should be within, which group 7 should be in. But 8, 9, 10, which everyone will call the slog, which have a very different pacing, very different style, very different level of character development, because you have a lot of characters that don't go anywhere, as opposed to the earlier books where everybody gets a resolution. And then you have Sanderson, which is Era 4, which is, a different author.
Right.
And I will almost say Knife of Dreams fits in its own little category. It kind of has to go with the Sanderson books.
But it isn't.
It certainly doesn't go with, but it isn't, because it's Jordan's little, so it's, 4.5 categories, because I can't really put Knife of Dreams anything. When I think of quality, I include it with the last 4, right? The last 4 is the resolution, right? As a book category of book, they are resolving the story, and Knife of Dreams certainly makes a really good start on that resolution. But it's certainly different kind of writing book, written book than the last.
I completely agree with you, Seth. I almost feel like Knife of Dreams it's almost like a foretaste of what it could have been if he had been able to overcome his amyloidosis.
Yeah.
Or, I know I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. I apologize.
You notice I haven't tried.
His illness. We'll go with that. No, it's
his illness. Thank you, Radia.
Sanderson was very, very lucky that he didn't have to rescue the books from the slog. He's really lucky that RJ was able to end the slog and get that upswing going again before he handed the baton off.
And I think RJ is too, for his legacy, right? Because so many authors would write off as, well, I think if he had ended after book 10 and then been unable to write book 11, I think it would have been like, it was a real shame that he went downhill at the end. I'm glad someone else was able to rescue the series after he died. But that's not what we say. We say, oh my God, if only he'd been alive to write the ending that he was starting to write.
Yeah, that's very true.
Speaking of endings, what about the middle? where we currently are.
Right. We have to journey before destination. We have to go through the middle before we can get to the end.
That's true. Thanks, Aradia. And I don't know, we can table this to the end, but have you guys heard anything about the show?
Not really.
Yeah.
We have no inside information.
Searching.
Yeah.
I can't even keep up with the outside information.
Yeah. We go to watchseries.com like everybody else, and that's it's not there.
Know that they exist. I don't even go there. I just wait for the show to happen to me.
Mm-hmm. To be honest, where I get most of my news is because I either edit or mostly just listen to TVAD.
Yeah, totally. I let them break it down for me.
And
if there's news, they'll let me know.
Yeah.
And we really have tried to get less emotionally invested in season 2. I think we were overly invested in season 1.
Well, I think we almost had to be because we had.
Yeah,
felt like we had to defend it.
Yeah,
absolutely. It felt like a moral calling, and I'm over that. Though I will say there was something about the show that I noted here that she passes her hands over the footprints. Annoura does, like obviously channeling. And like I remember when the show came out, I was like, what is with this interpretive dance, full body, like channeling?
Oh, yeah.
And it was like it was a lot for me because in the books he barely ever describes there being motions at all. It's very infrequent. And here is an instance where it is just on the page. He's not dancing around it. It's just happening. It's like, okay, thank you. Reality check. This is a thing in the books.
That's actually really one of the things I actually appreciate about Rafe and the way he did the show is, for the most part, I'm not going to say every time, but when he did make changes, he did try to justify in the book. It just is not always the same book that goes with the story that we're currently watching. And I think that's where people get kind of upset with. But I actually found most of his changes, even ones I may not have liked, when I saw where they came from, it made a lot of sense. I was like, okay. And I know for me, and again, I'm going to admit something here that's probably pretty embarrassing, but I was in my 20s when I started reading this, but I always imagined channeling, and literally me and my other 3 friends that were reading, my brother and my other 2 friends that were reading it together at the same time in the, mid 90s, we would go hang out at Barnes & Noble and just read and talk about it. And we used to talk about, well, what is channeling? How would you channel? And I always envisioned, like one hand in front of the other, like focusing and forcing the power through your hands. So for me, I totally get the whole like way they do it with the hands and everything as a focus, almost like a wand. Is because always, the power is not in the wand. The wand is a focus for the power. That's how I kind of saw hands. And that's one way I kind of thought it was kind of interesting that they did the whole hand thing with the show, because to me, I thought what Rafe was just saying was, yes, you don't have to use their hands, but you have to do whatever you're taught. I think there's even like part of the story one time where maybe it's Moraine, because she's always done this when channeling, she has to keep doing it. And so I think like if you do start with focusing or using your hands as a focus, you're going to constantly keep using that. And that's not necessarily something that would necessarily even be mentioned in the book. So for me, I didn't have a problem with the whole hand thing of Eamon Valda or whatever.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is mentioned in the books with the Aiel saying, you use unnecessary emotion and all of that. But it was just like, it's...
Of course the Aiel would. Of course the Aiel wise ones would.
Right. But yeah, in my mind, it's like, well, why wouldn't you just do it all in your head? But like, here's an example on the page of like, no, like even for a small thing, it's not even a battle weave, right? This is just like an investigative delving weave, but like she's bringing hand motions into it, which is interesting.
Well, and I wonder too, Aradia, how much of that is personality? Because like you're obviously a much more reserved person. I think you probably have your emotions in much more control than someone like me. But like I use my hands, constantly when talking. So I wonder if it was different like that with Aes Sedai too, like, or versus Wise Ones, whatever. Like maybe your personality had a lot to do with how you focused your use of the power as well.
Well, at least some founder effect in terms of the schools of thought that branched out from the breaking. I mean, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think a good analogy is reading, and the people who can read silently and the people who have to mouth the words as they read. And I feel like the Aes Sedai basically have to mouth the words. And it's like certainly not necessary to read, but if that's how you learn to read, it's hard to break away from that, and it can slow you down significantly, as opposed to someone who's just reading in their head.
And also, I kind of wonder, Seth, if that kind of relates to the whole healing is the battlefield version of medicine. And I wonder, too, if that's because that probably was what was escalated and used the most during those years when things were falling apart. And it could be that the same thing was true for, the focusing of the magic or whatever you do, like because they were like, I wonder how much of the breaking and all that affected even the stuff we say is tradition or we say is supposed to happen, and I wonder how that affects it as well. Sorry, I don't know if that was complete, but I know we're off topic. I apologize.
It's all good.
Yeah, let's jump back in.
And since we can kind of sidetrack here for a little bit. Is it not crazy sometimes when you read these? I think, again, I'm so sorry. I'm such a fan of yours. I wind up quoting you without realizing it. I realized, but you guys were talking about how Elida almost would be too much for, she'd be too close to Trump. I see that on Twitter or reading articles, so many people are saying we are truly living in something that 20, 30 years ago, we would have thought would have been a caricature. These people, the people that were Martin Taylor Green, we're seeing these people and we're like, okay. And even reading this, Maseama and all these people in Robert Jordan's books, I'm wondering 30 years ago when he was writing this, he had no idea how accurate some of these depictions and things about the human condition or even our society were going to be. And it's almost overwhelming a little bit.
Or did he?
History rhymes, right? It repeats itself. And I think, all he's doing is he's writing about past events and incorporating them into his novels. And just because the past events, the future events sort of repeat themselves and rhyme and look the same. And you have this cycle, this wheel of time that seems to turn as legends fade to myth. And he's really making a point.
If you're a student of history and you do speculative fiction, you will end up seeming like a prophet. Mm-hmm. It's a problem that good writers who read a lot have.
Which is why The Simpsons has predicted the entire past 15 years.
Because most of The Simpsons is based around good literature and then parroting it, right?
And good writing.
And in good writing, and so the good writing is based on past events, and past events repeat themselves. And so it's very easy for The Simpsons to look like prophets when all they're doing is saying, this has happened in the past. Here's an absurd version of it. Chances are the absurd version is going to happen in the future.
Right. And I guess that's probably true what's happening, I guess, with Jordan's writing here, whether it's Elida or Maseama or, whoever else, Pedro Nile or whatever, is we're seeing what at the time may have been absurd or even a caricature, but because of circumstances and whatever, we're seeing a lot of those caricatures that come together and come to life. So I get your point.
And I think that's what makes literature timeless, is these characters we recognize over and over again in history and in the future, means that these novels will always be relevant. We're never going to be like, oh, those were novels from the 80s and the 90s. They don't matter anymore. We'll be like, no, these characters are significant and characters that we see today, yesterday, and tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I completely agree. And honestly, I think, and I'm hoping we're starting to see it, but I think we're going to see that more and more with all this ChatGPT stuff and AI as it comes out, because I think we're going to see some really good uses of it and some really good literature, or not literature, let me rephrase that, some really good writing. But I think what it's going to highlight more than anything is the human component, the artist influence in good literature, in good writing. That's what I'm hoping anyway. I'm an optimist, so that's my hope.
I am very confident that the power of human creativity is going to remain unparalleled forever. I'm not concerned about our market as creatives.
That's very well said. I like that, Aradia.
Oh, sorry, Timber's here.
Hey, Timber.
Timber.
The Darkhound.
Yes, such a Darkhound.
He left his mark.
Very, very Darkhound.
Oh, but he's the nice Darkhound that came back.
Oh, yeah. He's the sweet one.
Yeah.
That's right.
He's the third kind of Darkhound that's actually sweet and cuddly.
Yeah.
You always thought Timber was a white fluffy dog? No, he's a black, sleek-looking, pity-looking dog. Maybe a little boxer lab if you want to. Oh, and now he's jumping down out of my lap. There we go.
The power of dogs jumping is insane.
Yeah, especially because they always jump off your balls.
Yes. It's like they have such force in those hind legs. My dog's only 40 pounds, and when he jumps away from me, it's Jesus, it hurts.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?